Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Crystal Rogers. Crystal Rogers, a 35-year-old mother of 4 from Bardstown, Kentucky, was known for her strong devotion to her children. She and her ex-husband Keith shared custody of their children. Despite the divorce, she maintained a friendly relationship with him for the sake of the children. At the time, her 2-year-old youngest son was with her current boyfriend, Houck. On July 5, 2015, Crystal's mother, Ballard, became worried when Crystal didn't respond to her phone calls. Crystal was a reliable and responsible who always responded to her calls, but this time Crystal was unresponsive. As the hours passed, Sherry's worry intensified, and after 24 hours without hearing from her daughter, she realized something was amiss. Sherry's instincts as a mother told her that Crystal's absence was unusual. She tried contacting Crystal multiple times, but her efforts were in vain. Sherry then reached out to Crystal's friends and family, hoping someone might know where she was, but no one had seen or spoken with her recently. Around the same time, Crystal's younger sister Brooke contacted Sherry, informing her mother that she too had been unable to reach Crystal. This makes Sherry even more worried and insecure. Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks, told her family that he had not seen her since Friday. He last saw her playing games on her phone before he went to bed. When he woke up the next morning, Crystal was gone. Brooks suspected she might have visited her cousin's house for the 4th of July celebrations. However, Crystal's mother, Sherry, became increasingly worried as she couldn't reach her daughter. She reported Crystal missing to the police department. While she was there, her son Casey received a call from a friend saying Crystal's car had been seen on the side of the road. This news alarmed Casey and his father, Tommy Ballard. They knew Crystal wouldn't voluntarily leave her car. When they arrived at the location, they found her car with a flat tire. This only deepened their concern, as they knew Crystal would have asked for help if she had car trouble. Casey and Tommy were puzzled as to why Crystal would stop the car to fix it herself. When they looked into the car, they noticed that Crystal's keys, phone, and wallet were still on the passenger seat. This discovery made them even more worried, as Crystal was not someone who would leave her belongings behind. The fact that her personal belongings were still in the car made her disappearance seem even more suspicious and unusual. After discovering Crystal's car on the Bluegrass Parkway, her father and brother immediately contacted the Nelson County Sheriff's Department. When investigators arrived at the scene, they found no signs of struggle, but one thing caught their attention: the driver's seat was positioned in a way that would have been uncomfortable for someone of Crystal's height, suggesting that someone else may have driven her car. The authorities continued to investigate and asked for help from potential witnesses. However, no one came forward with any useful information. The police then decided to use the media to appeal for public assistance in finding Crystal. They released her photo and asked for the public's help, but unfortunately, no one provided any significant leads. Tommy, Crystal's father, arranged search parties to find Crystal. The hot and humid weather made the searches challenging. Despite a large turnout, Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks, was absent. This made the police suspicious of his attitude. He seemed unconcerned about her disappearance. When questioned by detectives, Brooks provided an alibi, stating that Crystal and their young son had visited his family's farm the previous evening. They supposedly returned home around midnight, after which Brooks went to bed. He claimed Crystal stayed awake, engaged with her phone, playing games, as was her habit. In the morning, at 7 a.m., Brooks said their son was in bed with him, but Crystal was gone. Crystal's family initially suspected she might have gone out with her cousin. But those close to her dismissed this idea since she would never leave her 2-year-old son behind. Crystal's younger sister, Brooke, believed Crystal was planning to leave her partner, Brooks. According to Brooke, This was because Brooks had been dishonest with Crystal and lack of emotional attachment. Crystal told her mother, Sherry, that she wanted to leave Brooks. She said one of the main reasons was his controlling behavior towards her. Casey, Crystal's brother, had recently witnessed tension between Brooks and Crystal, including several heated arguments. The police asked Brooks to come in for questioning and take a polygraph test, but the results are not clear. Afterward, Brooks participated in a formal interview with the police. Detectives obtained video footage confirming details of Brooks' story. A video showed his truck entering the family farm, and later footage showed the vehicle leaving the property around midnight. However, because the windows of Brooks' truck were dark, police were unable to identify the occupants at the time. Brooks spent time at his parents' farm doing chores and setting a fire to burn some building materials. After for the fire to die down, he drove home. During a police interview, Brooks was questioned about a brief 13-second phone call he made to Steve Lawson, a business associate, while driving home. Brooks offered to have Steve explain the call to the police and asked him to call them during the interview. Steve claimed he called Brooks to get some phone numbers for a rental property, but Brooks said he needed to get home first and ask Crystal, who handled such matters. However, the police found Lawson's explanation suspicious, as it seemed rehearsed. The police were puzzled by this response, considering Brooks was with Crystal at the time of the call. They questioned why Brooks couldn't simply hand Crystal the phone, allowing her to discuss the issue immediately, rather than waiting to talk to her in person later. During Brooks's interview, his brother Nick, a Bardstown Police Department officer, called him with urgent advice to leave the interrogation room immediately. The police had doubts about their initial theory that Crystal had abandoned her car on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway and ran away. Instead, they suspected that something had happened to Crystal while she was at the Brooks family farm. As the investigation into Crystal's disappearance progressed, several people reported seeing Brooks's truck and Nick's police car at his family farm to the police. This led detectives to believe that the brothers might have been at the farm to dispose of evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. To learn more, the police brought in Brooks's brother, Nick, for questioning. They confronted him with eyewitness accounts placing that him at the farm on July 8 and asked him to explain his emergence there. Nick initially claimed he had no knowledge of the incident surrounding Crystal's disappearance and denied being present that night. The police continued questioning him, directly asking if he and Brooks had tampered with or hidden evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. Nick strongly denied any involvement and assured them that, as a police officer, he would never aid in covering up a crime. The police then asked Nick to submit to a polygraph test, which he agreed to. However, he failed to answer truthfully to two key questions: whether he knew Crystal's current location and if he was withholding information about her disappearance. Despite failing the polygraph test, Nick insisted that he was telling the truth. On October 15, investigators identified Brooks as the primary suspect in Crystal's disappearance. The same day, Brooks's brother, Nick, was terminated from the Bardstown Police Department for interfering with the investigation. Although the police were pretty sure they knew who the culprit was, they didn't have enough evidence to make an arrest. The police were concerned that if they took their suspect to court without sufficient evidence, the suspect might be acquitted. If that happened, they couldn't charge the suspect with Crystal's murder again. Due to the double jeopardy law. To help find more evidence, the FBI, Kentucky law enforcement agencies, Crystal's friends and family, volunteers, and missing people organizations conducted thorough searches at the Brooks family farm. The lengthy search left her loved ones terrified and desperate for news. As the search continued, her family remained hopeful that she would be found alive and well. At the Brooks family farm, investigators searched the ashes of a fire and, although they did not find any human remains, they did find pieces of clothing. Unfortunately, they were unable to link these clues to Crystal's case. The police executed multiple search warrants at the Brooks family farm, focusing on their cars and residences. However, these searches failed to yield significant leads or evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. A $100,000 reward was offered for any information that could help find Crystal, but unfortunately, no one stepped forward with any tips despite this large incentive. Tommy, Crystal's father, took it upon himself to investigate his daughter's disappearance, following every lead he received, no matter how small or insignificant it may have seemed. His determination was unwavering, driven by his love for Crystal. Unfortunately, Tommy had already faced a devastating loss in his family. In January 1979, his pregnant sister was brutally murdered by her husband and his accomplice. The perpetrators shot and beat her, set her remains on fire, and scattered them on a farm. Although it took years, the suspects were eventually arrested, found guilty, and sentenced to life in prison. Tommy remained committed to finding out what happened to his daughter Crystal, despite the many challenges he faced. He conducted his own investigation, canvassing the neighborhood, conducting interviews, and reaching out to anyone who might have information about his daughter's disappearance. To aid in his search, Tommy also utilized his own savings to hire private investigators and cadaver dogs. To keep track of the investigation, Tommy carefully documented every clue he found. He worked with the police, sharing his discoveries and asking for their advice. November 2016, Tommy took his 11-year-old grandson, Crystal's son, on a hunting trip on their property early in the morning. As they left, Tommy's wife Sherry watched them go, feeling uneasy. She couldn't help but pray for their safety in the woods. Sherry tried to calm down after they left, but her peace was short-lived. Just minutes later, she received a frantic phone call from her grandson, Crystal's son. His voice shook with fear. He then exclaimed, "Mimo, Papa has been shot." Sherry's world came crashing down. Her nephew's panicked voice on the phone told her something terrible had happened. She quickly threw on some clothes and rushed to call 911, and she reassured her distressed grandson that help was on the way. Her mind was flooded with fears of what might have happened to her husband, Tommy. When Sherry arrived at the scene, she witnessed a horrifying sight: her husband lying on the ground, unresponsive. Distraught, she rushed to his side and tried to wake him up, hoping he would respond. But her efforts only revealed a grim truth: blood was pouring out of his nose. The officers and bystanders at the scene quickly pulled her away so that the medical team could try to save him, but it was too late. Tommy was pronounced dead. The initial police reports suggested that Tommy's death was the result of a hunting accident. However, Sherry knew this could not be true. She was adamant that her husband had been murdered, and she made her feelings clear to the authorities. "This is no accident," she insisted. "This is she husband, and it's a murder, and you know it." During the investigation, the investigators was found that Tommy's own gun had not been used, making it unlikely that he had committed suicide. The investigators then determined that Tommy's 11-year-old grandson was not involved in the shooting. As the investigation progressed and more facts came to light, Sherry's suspicion that her husband's death was indeed a murder gained credibility. The Kentucky State Police have informed the public that they are treating Tommy Ballard's death as a murder. The Tommy family believes that he was killed because he was getting close to discovering what happened to his missing daughter, Crystal. They think the people responsible for Crystal's disappearance felt threatened by Tommy's investigation and had him murdered to prevent the truth from coming out. In 2022, the FBI conducted a 5-day investigation into Crystal's disappearance. Investigators returned to the Brooks family farm to search for more evidence, with the goal of gathering enough information to hold suspects for Crystal's disappearance accountable. In October 2022, the FBI confirmed that it would analyze all evidence collected at its lab in Quantico. As the investigation into Crystal's disappearance continued, the Kentucky Attorney General appointed a special prosecutor to help prosecute criminal charges related to the deaths of Crystal Rogers and her father, Tommy. Crystal's mother, Sherry, was aware of and fully supported the decision to appoint a special prosecutor. She believed the move was necessary to ensure justice for her husband and daughter, and she viewed the appointment as a positive development that brought new perspective and expertise to the case. The decision to appoint a special prosecutor also showed that the case was being taken seriously and that those responsible would be held accountable. On September 2023, authorities arrested Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Houck, and charged him with murder and tampering with physical evidence. The court set Brooks bail at $10 million and prohibited him from contacting Crystal's family members. Notably, Brooks was previously arrested in 2022 for multiple traffic offenses and was released after paying a series of fines. When Brooks was arrested for Crystal's murder, many in Bardstown brought a sense of relief. While the confirmation of Crystal's death was devastating, the community was relieved to know that justice was being pursued, bringing some sense of closure to the case. 1 month after his arrest, in October 2023, Brooks appeared in court for the first time, though virtually rather than in person. The judge inquired if the special prosecutor, Shane Young, was investigating other cases related to Crystal's case. The prosecutor confirmed that they were looking into the death of Tommy, Crystal's father, and suspected a connection between the two murders. Notably, Shane Young believed they had obtained the gun used to kill Tommy. The firearm was reportedly purchased from Nick, who allegedly used an alias during the transaction. Preliminary investigations revealed that the caliber of the rifle matched the one used in Tommy's shooting. Shane Young stated that they were examining the gun based on 5 key criteria. So far, the results have matched 4 of these criteria, suggesting a possible link between the firearm and Tommy's murder. Crystal's grandfather felt relief when the special prosecutors, Shane Young, connected the 2 murders in court. They hoped for a swift and fair outcome in both cases. However, when questioned about the allegations by Shane Young, Brooks and Brooks' mother refused to answer any questions. During the court hearing, the prosecutor alleged that the Brooks family had secretly recorded the grand jury proceedings. The prosecutor claimed that several family members Brooks were involved in this activity. Brooks' attorneys requested that the Nelson County judge be removed from the case, citing bias. They claim that the judge has had a hostile view of Brooks since 2017. The attorneys also argued that the $10 million bail is excessive and should be reconsidered. Attorneys representing Brooks argued that having a biased judge hear the case would be unfair to him. The lawyers argued that the judge's previous statements and actions showed that he was unfair. They asked the court to remove the judge and quickly appoint a new judge to ensure a fair trial. The Kentucky Appeals Court has recently made 2 key decisions. Firstly, Brooks will remain in jail with a $10 million bond. Secondly, the court has denied a request to remove the judge presiding over Brooks's trial. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Annie Lee. Annie Lee was born on July 3, 1985, in San Jose, California, to Vivian Van Lee and Hogan Lee, Vietnamese immigrants. As an only child, Annie demonstrated exceptional intelligence and talent from an early age, consistently excelling in her studies and being considered the top student in her school. Annie's favorite subjects were chemistry and biology. Her teachers believed she had a bright future in science, with some even predicting she might one day win a Nobel Prize. Throughout her school years, Annie actively participated in scientific conferences, where her work garnered various awards and recognition. As a high school student, she secured a $65,000 scholarship to study at any U.S. university. Annie chose the University of Rochester in New York, where she studied cellular development biology and medical anthropology. She later enrolled in Yale University's graduate school, working in a scientific laboratory and pursuing a doctoral degree in chemistry and biology. Annie's dissertation focused on the study of diseases caused by metabolic disorders. During her time working in the laboratory, she gained much research knowledge, which contributed to the treatment of diabetes and certain types of cancer. Annie, a student at the University of Rochester in New York, while pursuing her studies, met Jonathan Widowski, a fellow student and promising scientist. The two quickly dating, and their parents were pleased with their relationship. After graduating, Annie moved to New Haven, Connecticut, to attend Yale, while Jonathan chose to pursue his studies at Columbia University in New York. Despite the distance, the couple maintained their romance, visiting each other every weekend and making plans for their future. In the summer of 2009, Jonathan proposed to Annie with a beautiful diamond ring, and she happily accepted. They set their wedding date for Sunday, September 13, 2009. Initially, they only shared the news with their parents and close friends, keeping their colleagues in the dark. It wasn't until a week before the wedding, on September 6, that Annie sent out emails to friends and colleagues, announcing their upcoming marriage and a wedding invitation. The day after, the news spread rapidly throughout the department and the lab where Annie worked, becoming the most discussed topic. Annie and her fiancé had planned a wedding ceremony on Long Island, followed by a honeymoon at a luxurious resort in Greece. A few months before she went missing, Annie had written an article for the university publication, where she cautioned students about potential dangers and provided safety tips for when they were off campus. However, despite being aware of the risks, Annie herself fell victim to an unexpected tragedy at her workplace. On Tuesday, September 8, Annie left her university dormitory, where she shared a room with 3 friends, and headed to the University Medical Center laboratory, where she worked. The laboratory building, located on Amistad Street, has restricted access and requires a pass and special key card for entry and movement within the premises. A CCTV camera at the entrance captured Annie entering the building around 10 o'clock that morning. She went to her office, changed her clothes, stored her personal belongings, put on a medical coat, locked the door, and proceeded to the biolab. However, Annie never returned to her office that day and seemed to vanish in the corridors. Unfortunately, no one ever saw her alive again. On the evening Annie went missing, her dormitory neighbors were the first to discover the incident. They had grown accustomed to Annie's punctual nature, as she usually returned home at the same time every day. However, as midnight approached and she failed to return, her friends began to worry. Their concerns deepened when they were unable to reach Annie on her phone. Deciding to take action, they reported her disappearance to the police. Upon investigation, it was discovered that Annie's parents and fiancé had also been unable to contact her that night. Initially, they had assumed she was working late due to her heavy workload and would call them back when she was available. When the police arrived, they weren't too worried. They had heard what had happened and assumed that Annie was nervous before the wedding and needed time to calm down. However, their opinion quickly changed after examining Annie's office and reviewing the CCTV footage. They also tracked her movements within the building using her key card. The evidence revealed that Annie had entered the building in the morning but never exited. Her personal belongings, including her clothes, bag, wallet, and cell phone, were still in her office. Despite an extensive search, no sign of Annie was found, leaving behind only the unsettling feeling that she had vanished into thin. The disappearance of Annie Lee, a graduate student, led to an extensive investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Those who knew Annie personally described her as intelligent, kind, cheerful, and energetic, with no known enemies. Her family and fiancé anxiously waited for news, hoping she will return safely. However, detectives were less optimistic, concluding that it was likely she was no longer alive. The laboratory building, crime scene, was placed under guard, and the list of suspects was narrowed down to staff and students with authorized access. The university atmosphere was tense because everyone realized that the killer might be somewhere nearby. Annie's fiancé, Jonathan, who had flown in from another state, was questioned but had a solid alibi. Despite this, he was visibly shaken and on the verge of a nervous breakdown, deeply concerned about Annie's disappearance. Among the suspects, one is Annie's teacher. On the day she disappeared, he canceled his lectures for unknown reasons and had no alibi. Although his was initially questioned, after the police still believed the perpetrator was likely someone from Yale University's laboratory, either a student, faculty member, or staff. A disturbing detect was found on September 12, providing the first evidence that Annie was no longer alive. A medical coat stained with blood was discovered hidden behind a false ceiling in an auxiliary room of a building. The coat did not belong to Annie, but further examination revealed that the blood on it was indeed hers. On September 13, the body Annie was found in a narrow pipeline on the technical floor of the laboratory. The day she was supposed to get married and leave for her honeymoon in Greece. Her petite stature and fragile build made it easier for her killer to stuff her body into the small space. A service dog's keen sense of smell helped the police locate Annie's body. The location where her body was hidden suggested that the killer was familiar with the laboratory's layout. It was a spot that was hard to access, making it a clever yet sinister choice for concealing the crime. Annie's body showed severe signs of trauma. Most of her ribs were broken, her limbs were damaged, and several teeth were knocked out. However, according to the pathologists, the cause of death was mechanical asphyxia, which meant that Annie was severely beaten and then strangled. A further examination revealed that Annie's clothes had traces of seminal fluid. But it was concluded that she had not been raped. A few days before Annie's body was discovered, police attention was initially drawn to Raymond J. Clark III, a young laboratory technician. Raymond claimed to have seen Annie leave the building without her belongings, implying she intended to return. However, his testimony aroused suspicion from the police. Following the discovery of Annie's body, Raymond became the primary suspect. They collected DNA samples from Raymond and asked him not to leave the country until the investigation was completed. On September 17, Raymond was arrested. Forensic examination results showed that his semen was found on Annie's clothes. And his robe, stained with Annie's blood, was discovered hidden in the suspended ceiling. Additionally, Raymond had suspicious bruises on his body, suggesting that Annie had fiercely defended herself before her death. Despite the incriminating evidence, Raymond denied any involvement in the crime. Further investigation showed that Raymond was a very hot-tempered person. Easily angered and often had workplace conflicts. He frequently engaged in verbal altercations with colleagues and had a reputation for being cruel, having physically abused women he had relationships with in the past. Raymond did not excel academically, but he stood out as a promising athlete in school. He is known for his handsome looks and has a strong appeal to women. However, he was unable to get into university due to poor grades. Fortunately, with the help of some relatives, Raymond secured a job at a laboratory, starting as a janitor and eventually working his way up to become a technician. During this time, Raymond was in a relationship with a woman named Jessica Del Rocco. However, their relationship was tumultuous, and Jessica later testified against Raymond in court. She described him as controlling, stating that he would constantly monitor her activities, read her messages, and dictate what she could do and couldn't do. He would also become violent when they disagreed. And Jessica claimed that he would physically abuse her. After one particularly brutal incident, Jessica fled from Raymond. She temporarily relocated to another state to escape his abuse. Then Raymond had been in a relationship with Jennifer Radko, a Yale University student, for the past year. Jennifer ignored rumors about his alleged infidelity with students and lab employees. She accepted his marriage proposal, and they proceeding with wedding preparations. The motive behind the murder remains unclear, even after he fully admitted his guilt. He never revealed his motive, even after admitting to the crime. Initially, it was thought that the murder was related to a workplace conflict. Annie was conducting experiments on laboratory mice to study the effectiveness of enzymes in treating cancer, diabetes, and other diseases. Raymond, who considered the laboratory his domain, was in charge of the mice. Two theories emerged about the incident leading to the murder. The first theory suggests that Raymond might have had a conflict with Annie. On the day of the murder, Annie stayed late in the laboratory and entered the area where experimental animals were kept. Raymond, who had cleaned the area, go in there too. The confrontation could have intensified into a physical altercation, which in turn could have led to Annie being strangled by Raymond a fit of rage. A second theory proposes that Raymond had feelings for Annie, but she rejected his advances. Raymond, unaccustomed to rejection, was hurt by her refusal. When he learned about her upcoming wedding on September 7th, Raymond was completely overcome by intense feelings of jealousy. The next day, when he was alone with Annie in the laboratory, he attacked her, beating and attempting to rape her, then ultimately strangling her. This theory explains the appearance of seminal fluid on Annie's clothes. The case gained widespread media attention from the start. The victim was a promising young scientist, and the crime was committed on campus. Raymond first appeared in court in Connecticut on October 6, 2009, where he denied any involvement in the murder and the charges against him. The hearing was postponed multiple times to allow for the collection of all evidence and materials. It was discovered that Raymond had spent at least an hour with Annie in the laboratory, during which the murder took place. In an attempt to mislead investigators, Raymond used his key card over 50 times at various locations, eventually making his way to the technical floor. There, he spent around 15 minutes hiding the body in the wall. Raymond then activated the fire alarm, which forced the staff to evacuate the building, providing him with an opportunity to blend in and avoid suspicion. A crucial piece of evidence was discovered in the pocket of a robe found hidden under a false ceiling, a green ballpoint pen. Further examination revealed that Raymond had used this pen to sign his name in various work logs on the same day. Additionally, witnesses reported seeing Raymond scrubbing specific areas of the lab floor repeatedly over the next few days. Despite the floor appearing clean, he also disposed of the cleaning equipment and a pack of tissues with small brown stains, resembling blood splatters, in a trash can. Forensic analysis later confirmed that the tissues contained Annie's blood, indicating that Raymond had made a thorough attempt to eliminate any evidence. In February 2011, Clark agreed to a plea deal in exchange for a reduced sentence. At the court hearing on March 17, 2011, he pleaded guilty to murder and attempted rape, and apologized to Tanny's parents and fiancé. However, Raymond never revealed the details of the incident leading up to the murder or his motivation for the crime. As a result, he was sentenced to 44 years in prison. Raymond is currently serving his sentence at the Cheshire Correctional Institution in New Haven County, Connecticut, and will not be eligible for release until September 2053. The parents and fiancé of Annie have expressed that they find the given sentence to be fair. At the sentencing, Annie's mother delivered a heartfelt speech. With tears in her eyes, she expressed that she would never get the opportunity to hold her daughter again, witness her marriage, hear her laughter, or enjoy the presence of her grandchildren. She said goodbye to her child, whom she cherished as the greatest gift from God. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Carrie Leah Farver. Carrie Leah Farver was born on November 30, 1974 in Macedonia, Nebraska, USA. After going through many relationships, she raised her son Maxwell alone. Carrie Leah loved her son very much. Carrie Leah spent a month in bed due to severe depression. Her mother, Nancy Rainey, helped take care of her son Maxwell. The complicated relationship with Maxwell's father along with the difficult living conditions caused Carrie Leah, a young woman of 20 years old, to fall into an unstable psychological state. Doctors diagnosed Carrie Leah with bipolar disorder. People with bipolar disorder often have two opposite psychological states. One moment they can feel overly excited, energetic and friendly, but then they can fall into a state of depression, frustration and helplessness. This disease causes them a lot of difficulties in daily life. However, in the early 2000s, Carrie Leah's doctor found an effective treatment that allowed Carrie Leah to live a normal life. In the fall of 2012, Carrie Leah received a lucrative job offer in nearby Omaha, an opportunity she couldn't refuse. Carrie Leah accepted the offer. However, her son, Maxwell, was in middle school and didn't want to change his familiar surroundings, so Maxwell decided to stay with his grandmother in Macedonia. One day in November 2012, Carrie Leah met Dave Kropa at the auto repair shop where he worked. When Dave looked at Carrie Leah's Ford Explorer, he realized that he really liked this woman. Carrie Leah was showing Dave something inside the car, and they stood close to each other, and there was a little tension. Not long after, Dave and Carrie Leah went on a date. Carrie Leah went to Dave's house. A while later, a woman named Liz called Dave a lot and texted him. Then Liz went to Dave's house to pick up something he had left for her. Dave explained to Carrie Leah that Liz Gollier was the first person Dave met online in 2012. Liz, born in 1975 in Michigan, initially told Dave that she was not looking for a serious relationship because she was a mother and needed to spend most of her time with her children. In Dave and Liz's relationship, they had few topics to talk about, and their relationship was mainly physical. After a while, Liz began to worry about what Dave was doing when she was not around, as well as who he was seeing. Dave often reminded her that they were in an open relationship and that she should not worry. He also insisted that Liz was free to date other men. However, Liz was not happy with this and began to bother Dave more and more. Liz also felt jealous of Dave's children and their mother, Amy, because she could not understand the close relationship they had after the breakup. Eventually, Liz's actions upset Dave, and he decided to break up with her. Carrie Leah sympathized with Dave, as everyone had relationships in the past, and Carrie Leah did not let that affect their relationship, but Liz was clearly upset to see a strange woman in Dave's house. Liz, feeling that Dave was increasingly distancing himself from her, wrote text messages, emails, and called Dave. However, Dave would not stop seeing Carrie Leah or anyone else because of Liz. 2 weeks after moving to her new job, Carrie Leah began dating Dave. Carrie Leah and Dave began spending more time together. Dave felt comfortable with Carrie Leah around. Carrie Leah said that she was not looking for a serious relationship, but just wanted to enjoy the good times together. In December 2015, Liz was shot. Liz probably guessed who it was. Luckily, the wound was not fatal. Liz thought, "This can't go on any longer, I have to do something." At 9:45 a.m. at work, Dave suddenly received a text message from Carrie Leah. In the message, Carrie Leah expressed her desire to live with Dave forever. The content of the message made Dave feel confused and surprised, because he did not understand the reason for Carrie Leah's sudden change. Because before, they had discussed and agreed that both of them would not rush into a binding relationship. Dave gently replied to Carrie Leah that he was not ready for this big change. Carrie Leah's response was very unpleasant. When Dave returned to the apartment, he found that all of Carrie Leah's belongings that she had brought were gone. This made him think that Carrie Leah had left him. On the same day, Carrie Leah deleted him from her Facebook friend list. Although it seemed like everything was over, it was not. Dave began receiving a series of text messages and emails from Carrie Leah, which were full of curses and threats to ruin Dave's life. The messages were numerous and all of them were rude. In addition, Carrie Leah did not show up for work. The strange messages from Carrie Leah were not only sent to Dave, but also to her mother and 15-year-old son. In May 2013, Carrie Leah posted a lengthy post on her personal Facebook page in which she wrote, "She had answered enough questions to prove to everyone that she had had enough. You can either believe that she was a girl or leave her alone. She quit her volunteer job and she was fed up with people giving her a hard time. She just didn't want to go home right now. She was a grown woman, and if she wanted to leave home, she had every right to do so. Sorry for hurting everyone." Carrie Leah then remained absent for a while. Her mother realized something was wrong when Carrie Leah missed her own birthday, Max's birthday, and other family celebrations. Finally, when her father passed away. After a while, Liz Gollier began receiving messages from Carrie Leah. In those messages, Carrie Leah criticized and insulted Liz, even threatened Liz to stay away from Dave. To understand Carrie Leah's strange behavior, Liz contacted Dave. He said he was also in a similar situation. Carrie Leah sent him many messages and emails, in which Carrie Leah accused Dave of all kinds of wrongdoing, called him a liar, and promised to avenge the pain he had caused Carrie Leah. Gradually, the messages from Carrie Leah became more threatening, with confusing content and grammatical errors. Carrie Leah's mother insists that her daughter is not a hot-tempered person and has always been very careful in writing letters and documents. Carrie Leah pays attention to spelling and presentation. Is her bipolar disorder relapsing and developing into something more serious? After Carrie Leah's confusing actions, all the evidence points to Carrie Leah having psychological difficulties. Liz and Dave often receive hundreds of text messages and emails, even when they are together. Their phones constantly buzz with messages, which makes them both uncomfortable. Although they continue to date, Dave feels uncomfortable around Liz. She becomes more and more demanding, despite always insisting that Liz is fine with their no-strings-attached relationship. In January 2013, Dave found Carrie Leah's car in his front yard. Dave called the police and reported the incident. The police came to check the car and found no suspicious signs. The police then turned the car over to Carrie Leah's parents. Carrie Leah continued to text Dave and Liz. Carrie Leah even started sending pictures of Dave's children and threatening to harm them. As time went on, Carrie Leah continued to stalk them. Liz became increasingly jealous, made Dave angry and tired of the situation, and finally decided to end the relationship with Liz. In August 2013, Liz reported a fire at her house, which killed all of her pets, including a snake, a cat, and 2 dogs. Liz told the police that Carrie Leah had repeatedly threatened her through text messages and emails. So she suspected Carrie Leah of starting the fire. The police seized Dave and Liz's cell phones. Someone damaged Dave's auto repair shop and threw a brick through the window. Dave felt threatened, so he bought a gun to protect himself. After a while, Amy Flora, Dave's ex-wife, also began receiving threatening messages from Carrie Leah, because Dave often spent time with the children and met Amy. The police became suspicious for reasons that were hard to understand. Dave had only dated Carrie Leah for less than 2 weeks, but had been following him and his ex-girlfriends for 3 years. Meanwhile, Carrie Leah's family had not seen her for 3 years, and were trying to find her, using every method possible. In 2015, these efforts paid off. Police officers Ryan Avis and Jim Doty volunteered to investigate Carrie Leah Farver's disappearance. However, they found no evidence that Carrie Leah was alive. It was unusual for an adult to pack up and leave without spending any money. No one had seen her, and no one had heard her voice. This was very strange. With the assistance of Anthony Kawa, digital forensics administrator at the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office, police analyzed the contents of Dave and Liz's phones. In 2013, Anthony reported that Carrie Leah Farver had sent more than 50,000 text messages and 15,000 emails to Dave over the course of 3 years. Anthony also said that those impersonating Carrie Leah were becoming more sophisticated in their operations, trying to hide their IP addresses and real identities. It seems that someone knew what they were doing and had access to various computer programs. In December 2015, Liz Gollier contacted the police to report that she had been shot in the leg outside her home. She determined that the attacker was not Carrie Leah but Dave's ex-wife Amy Flora. Furthermore, Dave had a missing gun that Amy may have taken. It is possible that Amy was behind Carrie Lee's disappearance. A clue in the investigation indicates that people associated with Dave were being harassed. It is possible that Amy, having had a difficult life after breaking up with Dave, the father of her children, decided to take revenge and eliminate all rivals, and the relationship between Dave and Amy was still quite good. The children together brought them closer, and Carrie Leah clearly hindered their reunion. The police quickly questioned Amy, but surprisingly, Amy had an alibi. She was not at Liz's house when the shooting occurred, and this was confirmed by several people. Because there was no hard evidence, Amy was not arrested. Experts processed the data from Liz's cell phone and discovered important information. Anthony discovered fake email addresses with different variations of the name Carrie Leah. In addition, Anthony found an application that Carrie Leah used to schedule messages to be sent at certain times. This could explain why Liz and Dave received messages from Carrie Leah at the same time. Anthony began to suspect Liz Gollier. The answer became clear when Liz's fingerprints were compared to those found on the steering wheel of Carrie Lee's car, and they matched perfectly. The culprit was revealed. The killer has been here for years without anyone knowing. The case needs to be solved as soon as possible. The police want to catch Liz red-handed, so they plan to frame Liz. The police decide to make up a story about believing Liz, with Amy still being the main suspect. Liz takes the bait. Liz is extremely happy because she can finally get rid of another rival who is hindering Liz's happiness with Dave. Soon after, Liz gives the police an email that she says is from Amy. In the email, Amy admits to kidnapping Carrie Leah and includes many details about the incident. The confession in the email states that Carrie Leah was stabbed in the stomach or chest before being dumped. In addition, the email contains information about Carrie Lee's car and home address that no one else knows. The police say that Liz has provided information that only the real culprit would know. The email messages clearly indicated that the crime had taken place in a car, so the police decided to re-examine Carrie Lee's car. After the police removed the upholstery and fabric, they discovered blood stains belonging to Carrie Leah, who had gone missing. Liz had created fake messages on Carrie Lee's behalf without raising suspicion. According to the investigation, Liz Gollier dated both Dave and a man named Garrett. Garrett lived at the IP address identified as the source of the messages under Carrie Lee's name. When talking to Garrett, the police discovered that he had been in a long-term relationship with Shaunana Gollier, known to many as Liz. Garrett had invited Liz to live with his children after a fire. However, their relationship became complicated and strained when they lived together, with Garrett having to care for Liz's children while she was away. Garrett was surprised to hear from police that Liz had spent 40 to 50 hours a week impersonating the missing woman Carrie Leah. Liz's room was a mess. But no significant evidence was found. However, police did find several cell phones and electronic devices in the last room she stayed in. In late December 2016, Shaunana Gollier, known as Liz, was charged with first-degree murder. Liz's attorney, James Martin Davis, hopes the case will fail because Carrie Lee's body has not been found, the murder weapon has not been found, and Liz has not pleaded guilty. There is no evidence to prove that Carrie Leah is dead. The defense team decides to hold a new trial, with Liz's guilt decided by a judge. Electronic evidence was presented along with physical evidence. The prosecution asserted that the amount of blood found on the passenger seat of Carrie Lee's car was consistent with Liz's confession. Police analyzed the memory card that Liz had been using when Carrie Leah went missing. The memory card was on Dave's tablet. Police recovered deleted images, including a photo of a human foot with a Chinese symbol tattoo. The foot belonged to a man who had died many years earlier. There was also a tattoo that Carrie Lee's mother identified as Carrie Leah. The photo was used to confirm Liz's guilt. The judge found Shauna Gollier, also known as Liz, guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced her to life in prison without parole. Additionally, Liz was convicted of arson in August 2013, a fire that not only destroyed her home but also killed her pet. Liz was sentenced to an additional 20 years in prison. She is currently incarcerated at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women and maintains her innocence. Carrie Lee's son Maxwell has followed in his mother's footsteps by becoming a computer programmer. Maxwell graduated from the University of Iowa with a degree in software engineering and data science and is married. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Luz Maria Lopez. Luz Maria Lopez was born on March 17, 1995, in San Cristobal, Verapaz, a small town, to a modest family. She was the youngest of two children. Her parents, Morales and Brian, raised her along with her older brother, Omar. Luz Maria's early life was marked by a serious health scare. As an infant, she nearly died due to an intestinal obstruction and underwent a complex surgery. Although her doctors were uncertain about her chances of recovery, her mother's prayers and faith played a significant role in Luz Maria's survival. Fortunately, the surgery did not affect Luz Maria's development. She grew up to be a healthy and active child. During her school years, Luz Maria was a sporty. She was actively involved in gymnastics, athletics, and classical dance. She easily makes friends with everyone and got along with people from different backgrounds. Luz Maria excelled academically, particularly in the humanities. After completing her secondary education, Luz Maria decided to pursue higher education at a prestigious state university. She chose to study law and later specialized in criminalistics, a field that had always fascinated her. A fateful encounter took place when Luz Maria accompanied her mother to a car dealership in Coban, the capital of Alta Verapaz. The occasion was her older brother's 25th birthday, and the family wanted to surprise him with a motorcycle he had always desired. Inside the dealership, they were warmly greeted by a courteous and attentive young sales consultant named Jorge, who showcased the available models, offering some advice. Although Luz Maria and her mother have already chosen a model, but they want to consider and discuss it with her father before making a decision to buy it. As they left, they took a business card from the dealership and Luz Maria left her phone number for further communication. Shortly after, she received a call from Jorge himself, but instead of discussing the potential purchase, the conversation turned to a more personal subject. Over the following days, Jorge contacted Luz Maria several times, gradually building up the courage to invite her to meet at a coffee shop. Jorge was clearly smitten with Luz Maria, the beautiful, sultry brunette, but he didn't know how to approach her. Luckily, Luz Maria also liked Jorge, and when he asked to meet, she happily agreed. Although Luz Maria was a year younger, their small age difference wasn't an issue. They fell deeply in love, both believing it was love at first sight, and that a long, happy life was ahead. A few short months into their relationship, they decided to live together, despite parental objections. They had a small, private wedding, attended only by close friends and family. However, their special day almost got derailed due to a mishap at the banquet venue. They had to cough up extra cash to save the celebration, which wedding ultimately took place on schedule. Jorge was born in 1996 in Santa Catalina Latina, a town in central Guatemala. Jorge and his younger brother, Pablo, grew up in a low-income household. His family struggled financially, so as children, they did not have the luxury of fine clothes and expensive toys, as the family's limited income only covered the most basic needs. Even though Jorge grew up in difficult circumstances, he seemed to have no motivation to change his life for the better. He lived life at his own pace, choosing to enjoy simple pleasures rather than strive for advanced degrees or job security. Those who knew Jorge described him as introverted, unsociable, and having few close relationships, especially with women. When he met the love of his life, Luz Maria, he went all out to win her heart and quickly proposed, fearing she might change her mind. However, Luz Maria's parents, Al Morales and Brian, were suspicious of him from the start. They couldn't quite put their finger on what it was about him that they didn't like, but they couldn't convince their daughter to call off the wedding. The marriage turned out to be unhappy. After the wedding, Luz Maria became pregnant, but she had not yet finished her university degree and struggled to find a good job. Due to her lack of experience and health issues, she had to accept short-term, low-skilled jobs. Meanwhile, her husband lost his job and was in no hurry to find a new one. When their daughter, Alice, was born, the family's financial situation became more difficult. Both spouses were unemployed, and they had no money to pay rent, buy food, or pay for the family's basic needs. Jorge convinced Luz Maria that their only option was to temporarily move in with his parents. Luz Maria was initially hesitant, but facing no alternative and having a baby to care for, she eventually gave her consent. Luz Maria's mother was aware of the problems her daughter was facing in her marriage, but despite mother concerns, Luz Maria was optimistic that things would improve. Luz Maria assured her mother that everything would get better soon, so her mother decided to visit her and see how she was doing. However, when she went to Luz Maria's husband's house to see her daughter, she was shocked by what she found. Luz Maria was in a terrible state, eating only once a day and very little at that. This was partly due to Jorge's family not providing her with enough food, even though she was unemployed and breastfeeding her young daughter. The lack of food was only one of many problems Luz Maria faced in her in-laws' home. She was constantly belittled and even physically abused by her husband's younger brother. He was annoyed by the sound of the baby crying and the presence of children's belongings in the house. On several occasions, he threw items at Luz Maria, including a baby bottle that hit her and her daughter, Alice, who was in her arms. Despite witnessing these events, Jorge just stood by and did nothing to protect his wife and children, he treating them as if they were strangers. Al Morales convinces her daughter to take her granddaughter to her maternal home. Jorge arrived shortly afterwards, asking his wife to return home and promising to find a job. Luz Maria agreed, on the condition that they could rent their own apartment and live separately from Jorge's parents. After completing her education and defending her diploma, Luz Maria landed her dream job at the city prosecutor's office. As a smart, talented, and responsible young woman, she quickly earned the respect of her colleagues and began to advance in her career. As time passed, the family's financial situation significantly improved, thanks to Luz Maria's hard work and success. They were eventually able to afford a car. Meanwhile, Jorge continued to struggle with his own life, failing to find direction and instead relying on his wife's income. His laziness and jealousy intensified over time, causing tension in the household. Jorge had a volatile temper, and the situation worsened with time. Jorge was a man who preferred a life of leisure, spending most of his time at home watching TV, drinking beer with friends, and relying on his wife's income. He was extremely possessive and controlling, restricting his wife's freedom and autonomy. He wouldn't allow her to make friends, have lunch with colleagues, or even be alone without him. He constantly monitored her phone activity, checked her call history, and read her messages. He also forbade her from creating social media accounts. When they were alone at home, Jorge's behavior was just as bad. He frequently arguments, blamed his wife for all their problems, and never took responsibility for his actions. When they lived with his parents, Jorge failed to stand up for his wife, instead watching as she was humiliated, insulted, and even physically abused by his relatives. Jorge frequently resorted to physical violence in their relationship. He had a controlling attitude towards his wife, Luz Maria, and wrongly believed she would accept his abusive treatment. Their neighbors frequently heard screams coming from their house and witnessed signs of physical abuse on Luz Maria's face and body. Luz Maria had tried to leave her husband multiple times, taking their daughter and moving in with her parents. However, her husband would always show up, beg for forgiveness on his knees, and promise to change. Despite her parents' warnings to leave him, Luz Maria would forgive her husband and give him another chance. On December 15, 2020, after another violent argument, Luz Maria took their 3-year-old daughter, Alice, fled to her mother's house in tears. The next day, Jorge arrived, but it was unclear whether he was seeking reconciliation with his wife or just wanted his car back. He claimed to have found a new job and promised that their lives would improve, swearing that he would never physically harm Luz Maria again. Luz Maria believed him once more and returned to their rented apartment with her husband. In January 2021, Jorge failed to get a job as promised and stole the money Luz Maria had earned, leaving their family with nothing. Luz Maria called her mother to complain, and her mother agreed to meet with her to give her some money until she received her next salary. However, on January 19, Luz Maria failed to show up and was unreachable by phone, which was unusual for her. Concerned for her daughter's well-being, Morales went to Luz Maria's workplace the next day and found that she had not shown up for 2 consecutive days and had not been in contact with anyone. Around the same time, Jorge was also looking for Luz Maria. He went to the prosecutor's office claiming they had a fight and assuming she had gone to her mother's house. However, Morales suspected that he was lying and immediately went to the police to report Luz Maria missing. That same day, a nationwide alert system was launched under the codename Isabel Claudina. This system was originally designed to facilitate urgent searches for missing young women. When the massive search began, her husband, Jorge, was immediately identified as the lead suspect. In fact, he was the only suspect. Luz Maria had no enemies, and there was no reason to believe she had been kidnapped. The last person to see her alive was Jorge himself. Jorge denied any involvement in Luz Maria's disappearance, claiming he had been searching for her and was outraged to be considered a suspect. Jorge's story had several holes in it, and he couldn't give a clear reason for not telling the police about his wife's disappearance on the same day it happened. If Jorge thought Luz Maria was at her mother's house, it wasn't clear why he didn't call or visit her there. On January 22, municipal workers stumbled upon the body of Luz Maria Lopez while responding to a clogged storm drain near the road. When they lifted the grate, they found the large plastic bag containing charred human remains. The workers immediately reported the discovery to the police, suspected that the body might be that of Luz Maria. Forensic experts confirmed that the remains belonged to she, and Luz Maria's parents and brother identified the body despite its severe disfigurement from fire. Notably, the body was found on the same street as the prosecutor's office where Luz Maria worked. Despite the body's severe burns, pathologists determined that Luz Maria had been severely beaten and died from asphyxia. Evidence of internal hemorrhages, fractures sustained while she was still alive, and caked blood in her nose and mouth supported this conclusion. Deep marks on her neck also indicated strangulation. At the time of the discovery of the body, no new suspects had emerged. Luz Maria's parents were convinced that their son-in-law, Jorge, was responsible for the brutal murder of their daughter. As a result, Jorge was immediately taken into custody, and investigators began to look into the motive behind the crime. Experts in psychology and criminal behavior were consulted to examine the relationships within the family and the marriage. During the investigation, Luz Maria's mother, Morales, provided an audio recording that had been sent to her anonymously by a neighbor who had witnessed their frequent arguments. The recording captured a heated argument between they, in which Luz Maria frantically screams and cries for help, accompanied by the faint sounds of a child crying in the background. Morales was deeply shocked and extremely upset by the news. She emphasized that if the witness had immediately contacted the police, her daughter might still be alive. The witness did not call the police or even visit the house where the screams originated. The police were unable to locate the anonymous person, which meant they could not be officially involved in the investigation. During an interview, Morales urged citizens to be vigilant and report instances of domestic violence to the police rather than simply documenting them. She believed that such actions could help save lives. The crime sparked widespread outrage, prompting thousands of people to take to the streets and demand justice for Luz Maria. Jorge was taken into custody, but he continued to deny his involvement, claiming he had driven his wife to work on the day she disappeared. Security footage did show their car heading in the direction of her workplace, but the tinted windows made it impossible to determine how many people were inside. Additionally, no footage showed the car stopping or Luz Maria getting out. At the house they was renting, police discovered evidence of a violent incident. There were faint blood stains and drag marks, suggesting that this was where the brutal attack had occurred. Further evidence was discovered in the trunk of the family car, where microscopic fragments of burnt human flesh were found. The investigators also became interested in a recent purchase made by a double orthopedic mattress. Specifically, they were interested in the dense polyethylene wrapping that came with the mattress. A comparative analysis revealed that Jorge had used this wrapping to package the burnt remains of Luz Maria. Additionally, several neighbors came forward as witnesses, reporting that they had frequently heard Jorge yelling at his wife and threatening to kill her. Just days before Luz Maria's disappearance, Jorge had been overheard shouting that he would kill her if she tried to leave him, and that he would hide her body so well that no one would ever find it. Criminologists used collected data and witness testimony to reconstruct the events surrounding the crime. On the night of January 19, 2021, a brutal murder took place. The day before, Luz Maria and her husband, Jorge, had a violent argument. Jorge physically assaulted her. On this occasion, his rage escalated, causing him to strike his wife multiple times. Her screams for help were heard by the neighbors, but they failed to report the incident to the authorities. The beating left Luz Maria with a broken nose and a head injury. Jorge then strangled her with his bare hands. In an attempt to dispose of the body, he dragged it to the backyard, doused it with flammable liquid, and set it on fire. However, the fire produced a significant amount of smoke and a strong odor, which Jorge feared would attract the attention of the neighbors. He quickly extinguished the flames, wrapped the charred remains in plastic, and sought a secluded location to hide the body, he believing it would never be discovered. Jorge committed a heinous crime in front of his 3.5-year-old daughter, who was old enough to partially understand what was happening. The child witnessed the beating and crime, and her cries and screams were recorded. Despite this, Jorge attempted to cover his tracks by using his knowledge of forensics, gained from his wife's textbooks, to create an alibi. He disposed of her body in a drainage sewer on a poorly lit road with no surveillance cameras. The next morning, Jorge drove to his wife's workplace, pretending to have taken her there as usual. He then began a fake search for her, contacting her colleagues, friends, and family. During the trial, Jorge's lawyers delayed proceedings and attempted to mislead the investigation. They claimed that all the evidence and witness statements were indirect and did not directly prove Jorge's guilt. Defense attorneys requested that Jorge's detention be changed to house arrest, arguing that he was deeply depressed due to the accusations of killing Luz Maria he loved and the mother of his child. However, the crucial evidence came from Luz Maria's phone, which was in Jorge's possession. On the day after the crime, he sent multiple messages from her phone to different people, attempting to make people believe that Luz Maria was still alive. An analysis of the phone's movements revealed that it was consistently in the same locations as Jorge's phone. The defense team attempted to spin this evidence in their favor, claiming that Jorge had found his wife's phone and was driving around the city with it while searching for her. However, they failed to explain why Jorge was sending messages from her phone. Furthermore, bruises and scratches on Jorge's body, which were documented by experts through photographs, suggested that Luz Maria had put up a struggle. The most noticeable injury on Jorge was a scratch on his neck. However, investigators were unable to find Jorge's skin cells under Luz Maria's fingernails. Despite several questionable points in the case, the prosecutor pushed for the maximum possible sentence. The defendant was found guilty of brutally murdering his wife in October 2022. Jorge was sentenced to 50 years in prison, despite maintaining his innocence. Custody of their young daughter, Alice, was awarded to her maternal grandparents. The grandparents expressed that their granddaughter had given their lives new meaning. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shanynthia Gardner. Shanynthia Gardner was born in Memphis, Tennessee, in the late 1980s. Shaninthia's childhood was relatively ordinary. She was a beautiful, slender, curly-haired brunette with a talent for music and a creative spirit. She had a gift for composing songs and singing, which earned her local recognition and fame. Her love for music was just one of her passions. In addition to singing, Shanynthia enjoyed fashion and photography. She was a natural in front of the camera and had an artistic eye for capturing everyday moments. Despite her many creative pursuits, Shanynthia was also devoted to charity and her faith. She regularly attended church and prioritized her family's needs. Her life seemed to be on a promising path, filled with potential and possibilities. Shanynthia was 14 years old when she met Dur Clayton through mutual friends. They quickly discovered common interests and became friends. As they grew older and graduated from high school, their friendship evolved into a romantic relationship. They were perceived as a serious and stable young couple, but had some minor run-ins with the law, including traffic violations and disorderly conduct. In 2008, Dur faced a serious accusation of assaulting a woman, although it was allegedly unintentional. Fortunately for him, the charges were eventually dropped. That same year, Shanynthia and Dur began living together, and they had a son. Shanynthia took on a caring motherly role not only to their son but also to Dur's 2 children from a previous relationship. Sonia Clayton, Dur's mother, considered Shanynthia a part of their family, not just she her son loved. Shaninthia's devotion to her children made her special in Sonia's eyes. Although the relationship between Shanynthia and Dur was short-lived, they maintained some contact after the breakup. In Sonia's opinion, Shanynthia remained a good partner and caring mother to Dur. Shaninthia's marriage to Martin Gardner marked a new chapter in her life. He brought joy and stability, and she won him over with her kindness and love for children. To Martin, Shanynthia embodied feminine tenderness and wisdom. Shanynthia and Martin's life together progressed quickly. In September 2013, they moved into an apartment in southeast Shelby County and started their life together. After their wedding, they welcomed their first child, Telone. The following year, Saya was born, and soon after, 2 more girls, Savi and Yazzie, joined the family. In total, Martin and Shanynthia had 4 children together, in addition to Shaninthia's child from a previous relationship. For the young mom, her children were always the top priority. She enjoyed her part-time work at the Children's Hospital and was also actively involved in a center that raised funds to support children in need. Helping others was her true calling, and she dedicated her life to it with gratitude. Friday, July 1st, 2016, began like any other ordinary day. At around noon, Shanynthia was speaking with her husband, Martin, over the phone. Her voice remained calm, as it typically was. She told her husband she was going to watch a movie with the kids, giving no indication that anything was amiss on this ordinary day. However, during a quiet conversation between the spouses, a sudden and inexplicable madness took hold of Shanynthia. She grabbed a kitchen knife and entered the living room, where she attacked her 6-month-old daughter, Yazzie. The defenseless baby was caught off guard and her life was brutally cut short by the person she trusted most. The eldest child, at just 7 years old, witnessed this horrific scene unfold before his eyes, unable to fully comprehend the tragedy. Panicked and desperate, he fled the house. Shanynthia pursued him, still armed with the knife, intent on continuing her rampage. She chased after Dur, but his terrified screams caught the attention of the neighbors. A couple of neighbors rushed outside after hearing screams and were met with a horrific scene that would haunt them. Shanynthia stopped attacking Dur when she realized she was being watched. However, the horror was far from over. Chania went back inside the house, where her children, Savi and Talon, were waiting. In a state of distress, she went upstairs to the bedroom where the younger children were, marking the end of their innocent lives. The witnesses quickly called emergency services, requesting help for Dur and his siblings. At that moment, no one could have predicted the tragic outcome that awaited the quiet neighborhood. When the sheriff's personnel arrived, they were confronted with a gruesome scene. Inside the house, they found 4 lifeless children, covered in blood. The sight was shocking. Shanynthia calmly called her husband, Martin, and confessed to killing their children. The house was now filled with blood and horror. The investigators had obtained a bloody knife. Chaplains and specialists were called in to provide support to Dur, who had endured unimaginable trauma and required immediate attention. The sheriff's department launched a major operation, cordoning off the apartment complex, including the golf area and country club. Shanynthia was taken into custody without bail, and her trial was swiftly scheduled for July 5th. Despite the heinous nature of her crimes, Shanynthia was still a mother and partner, someone who had once nurtured love, care, and joy. A friend of Shanynthia, Michelle Jaiman, actively defended Shanynthia on social media, countering the unjust accusations and emphasizing a key factor: postpartum depression. The case sparked discussions, with Dr. Joel Rissman, a psychiatrist at the University of Tennessee Medical Center, noting that mothers killing their children is rare and often linked to mental health problems. Dr. Rissman also highlighted the state's insufficient mental health funding, which frequently leaves families without vital support. Dr. Diane Barnes, a specialist in psychology and postpartum health, clarified the distinction between postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. She emphasized that these are 2 separate conditions with distinct symptoms. Although the exact nature of Shaninthia's condition required further examination, Dr. Barnes expressed skepticism that a woman experiencing postpartum depression would commit such acts, instead suggesting psychosis as a more plausible explanation. Dur's father did not believe Shanynthia was guilty. Although he was not his son's guardian, he was able to visit him after his relationship with Shanynthia ended, but this stopped in November 2014. He noticed Shanynthia becoming more radical and controlling. His attempts to contact his son were unsuccessful, and he was excluded from his life. Those close to Shanynthia noticed a significant change in her. She began experiencing discomfort, which turned into anxiety, paranoia, and panic attacks. Her behavior became unpredictable, and some suspected postpartum depression. This was a shock, as Shanynthia was seen as strong and dependable. She had always been in control, but now seemed to be struggling. Shaninthia's sudden change in behavior in March 2015 left many people baffled. At first, her friends and family couldn't understand what was happening. One day, she left work early, picked up her children, and drove them down an unfamiliar road, away from their home. Her husband, Martin, thought she was just going for a walk in a park, which was a normal part of her daily routine, so he wasn't immediately concerned. However, as the hours went by, Shaninthia never came home, which worried Martin greatly. He decided to alert the authorities to look out for his wife, who was driving with their 5 children. Shaninthia drove over 74 miles east, from Memphis to Corinth, but it's unclear why she chose that destination, as she didn't know anyone there. She was later found in the emergency room of St. Francis Hospital, but the police didn't explain how she ended up there. Shaninthia had superficial cuts on her neck and one wrist. If she had attempted to harm herself, her children were the only witnesses, but they were too young to understand what was happening. Eventually, the authorities brought Shaninthia home. However, her behavior became even more unusual after that. She told Martin that someone was threatening her and their family, which shocked him, as she provided no details about the supposed threat or who was behind it. There had been no previous incidents of this kind. When Shaninthia was with family and friends, she began complaining about her job and workload, claiming it made her feel terrible. She soon started saying that some co-workers wanted to harm her. Despite these strange claims, Shaninthia showed no signs of being violent or abusive towards her children or others. The investigation into Shaninthia Gardner's case proved to be a challenging process. Craig Morton, her defense attorney, opted not to discuss the case with the media in its initial stages, deeming it premature for such comments. During the court hearing on July 5, 2016, Shaninthia remained silent, appearing via video link. Despite being questioned by Judge Lambert, she refrained from speaking. Following the trial, Shaninthia was transferred to the Mental Health Institute. Her relatives attended the courthouse but chose not to speak with reporters. Meanwhile, Morton's attorney and prosecutor Jennifer Nichols intended to file a motion to preserve evidence, including information obtained from social media. January 2017 saw Shaninthia formally charged with 4 counts: aggravated child abuse, aggravated murder with a deadly weapon, another count of aggravated child abuse, and child neglect. The investigation into the mysterious and gruesome events continued, leaving the community seeking justice and answers to numerous questions. During the hearing, loved ones of Shaninthia testified about the events of that fateful day. Sonia, Martin's mother, was shocked to learn of the tragedy and rushed to the scene to find her grandson, Der. Initially, she thought something supernatural was involved, but as the shock wore off, she considered possible motives. Sonia wondered if their potential divorce and fear of caring for 5 children alone might have driven Shaninthia to commit the horrific act. The trial was significantly delayed due to Shaninthia's multiple psychiatric evaluations. However, in 2021, the non-jury trial finally commenced. The defense centered its strategy around Shaninthia's mental illness, while the prosecution acknowledged her condition but argued that she could distinguish right from wrong and understood the illegality of her actions. In December 2021, Judge James of the Shelby County Criminal Court rejected the defense's argument, and Shaninthia Gardner was found guilty of all charges. 2 months later, Shaninthia, 34, appeared in court for sentencing, accompanied by her husband Martin. Judge James sentenced her to life in prison for each murder count, plus 15 years for each count of child abuse and neglect. Shaninthia can apply for parole only after serving 51 years. Considering the 5 years she spent in prison before sentencing, she will be eligible for parole in approximately 46 years, at the age of 80. After the sentencing, the prosecutor expressed agreement with the decision, citing that it aligned with their goal of achieving justice for Martin and his children. Upon hearing the verdict, Martin felt a sense of relief knowing that Shanynthia would no longer be able to harm any more children. An evening vigil was held at the apartment complex where the family lived, attended by neighbors, family members, and law enforcement officers. The gathering was a tribute to the innocent victims, with attendees holding red and white candles and offering prayers for the departed souls. The Reverend Pastor of the Baptist Church emphasized that the vigil marked the beginning of the community's healing process. He noted that those present were united in their desire to support the surviving baby and his father during this challenging time. Dar did not attend the memorial ceremony, with his grandmother Sonia explaining to the media that he was too consumed by anger to participate. The president and CEO of the Children's Hospital where Shanynthia worked extended condolences on behalf of the hospital staff. Martin's colleagues created a social media account to support him with the funeral arrangements for his 4 children. At the ceremony, Martin displayed remarkable strength and dignity in his speech as he shared a few words about his children and family. He concluded by emphasizing that his home was once filled with happiness when his children and Shanynthia were present, and that he would always cherish this memory. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of the Winkler family. On March 22, 2006, the small town of Selmer, Tennessee was shaken when it received terrible news. 31-year-old Pastor Matthew Winkler was brutally murdered in his own home, and his wife Mary and their 3 daughters, 8-year-old Patricia, 6-year-old Mary Eliza, and 1-year-old Brianna, vanished without a trace. That evening, Matthew failed to attend the Church of Christ service with his family, which was out of character for the responsible pastor, who always informed others if he needed to miss an event. What's more, none of the family members answered their phone, which added to the growing unease. Concerned community members decided to visit the Winklers' residence to investigate and offer help if needed. When they arrived, the house appeared normal, with no signs of forced entry or anything suspicious. Inside, lights were on in several rooms, and a television was playing loudly in one room, giving the impression that the family was simply busy with their daily activities. The front door was locked, and despite knocking, no one responded. Phone calls also went unanswered. Through the curtained windows, it was impossible to determine if anyone was inside or what was happening. Although the situation was extremely unusual, no one was eager to contact the police. Instead, a community elder was called, and they advised searching for a spare key to let themselves in. An hour and a half later, community members finally entered the house and discovered an unsettling scene. Everything inside was in order, with no signs of intrusion, but the owners were missing. The scene seemed normal until they entered the master bedroom, where they found the pastor's lifeless body lying on the floor in a pool of blood. A massive gunshot wound in his back had caused blood to spatter everywhere, and dried blood foam covered his face. The body had already gone cold and stiff, indicating that Matthew had likely been killed that morning, as he was still dressed in his pajamas. The police conducted a forensic examination of the body and determined that the pastor was killed by a single shot to the back from a large caliber weapon. He died shortly after being wounded due to massive blood loss and was unable to call for help. It was impossible to establish whether any strangers were in the house at the time of the murder, as the people who arrived before the police had destroyed all evidence. The crime scene was unusual, and those who could provide information about what happened had disappeared. The fate of the pastor's wife and daughters remained unknown. The police suspected that they might have been kidnapped or also killed. In addition, the family minivan, a Winkler, was missing from the garage. A massive search was launched, and the state issued a yellow alert, which meant that children were missing. All citizens were asked to be vigilant and assist in the search. Matthew Brian Winkler was born on November 21, 1974, in Henderson, Tennessee, a picturesque country town. As the youngest of 3 sons, he grew up with his brothers James and Daniel in a conservative Christian family. Their parents, Dan and Diane Winkler, were very religious and raised their sons in a strict and obedient environment. Notably, Matthew followed in the footsteps of his ancestors, becoming a minister in the 5th generation. His father, great-uncle Michael, grandfather Wendell, great-grandfather Merlin Winkler, and great-great-grandfather Merlin Paul Winkler Sr. were all preachers of the gospel at some point. His father, who ran the local preachers' school, was a respected and influential figure in their hometown. The Winkler brothers attended Sunday school and actively participated in church activities during their younger years. In high school, Matthew showed a serious interest in soccer, and everyone who saw him play noted his talent, predicting he could become an outstanding athlete of world renown. However, he later decided to sacrifice a promising sports career in favor of Bible study and church ministry. After completing school, Matthew's family lived in Austin, a small city in Texas. Although he was a creative person with a strong charisma, he did not have any exceptional academic achievements to his credit. After graduating from high school, he enrolled in Freed-Hardeman College and completed his studies successfully. While pursuing his college education, Matthew also started his ministerial career under his father's guidance. He served as the youth minister at the Central Church of Christ in McMinnville. Later, he was appointed to the preaching position at the 4th Street Church of Christ in Selmer, Tennessee. Mary Carol Winkler was born in 1973 in Tennessee to a deeply religious family. Her sister Patricia, born premature, suffered from cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and mental retardation. Despite her condition, Mary was very close to Patricia, caring for her with kindness. Tragedy struck in 1987 when Patricia died in a bathtub after an epileptic seizure. Mary was devastated, blaming herself for not being there to prevent it. Teachers were concerned about Mary's well-being due to her deplorable state, so they sent her to see the school psychologist, who provided her with help. However, when her father found out, he caused a scene and prohibited his daughter from continuing the sessions, insisting that family issues should only be discussed within the family. In reality, Mary never received genuine emotional support from her parents. As a result, Mary grew up to be modest and extremely shy, always trying to avoid conflicts. After the tragic death of her little sister, Mary became withdrawn. Because her father refused to let her seek professional help, the unresolved trauma accumulated over the years, ultimately leading to severe psychological problems. Following Patricia's death, Mary's parents decided to adopt Charlotte, a young girl from a troubled and large family. Soon they were also granted custody of Charlotte's 2 brothers and sister, and the siblings were reunited in their new home. Mary, once again, took on the role of the older sister, caring for the younger children and assisting her mother. Matthew and Mary Winkler met shortly after Matthew's high school graduation. Despite his popularity among girls, due to his athletic build and handsome features, Matthew's strict religious upbringing kept him from getting too caught up in romantic entanglements. They quickly developed a strong connection, which soon blossomed into a deep love for each other. This was the first intense emotional experience for both of them, and after a few months, they introduced each other to their parents. With their parents' blessing, they began making wedding plans. They tied the knot in April 1994. When their first child, Patricia, was born, Matthew was still in college and had to take a temporary break from his studies. He got a job at a construction site, but didn't last long due to his inability to cope with the physical demands. During this period, Matthew's volatile personality began to emerge. He would often get irritable and angry over small things, and sometimes struggled to control his temper. However, Mary chose not to complain or share their family issues with others. As a meek and obedient young woman, raised in a patriarchal environment, she followed her husband's lead in every aspect. At first, Mary's family lived close to her parents' house, allowing her to visit them often. However, Mrs. Freeman, Mary's mother, was soon diagnosed with cancer, which progressed rapidly and took her life within a few months. This was another devastating blow for Mary, who was left to care for her younger siblings. To make matters worse, Mary was pregnant again at the time. Shortly after giving birth to her second daughter, the family relocated to a new city, where they purchased a small house of their own. After the move, Mary became fully devoted to caring for her newborn, and as a result, her relationships with her father and younger siblings began to deteriorate as they required constant attention. Furthermore, Mary struggled with severe postpartum depression. Everyone familiar with the Winkler family noticed Mary's peculiarities. She was introverted and even socially anxious, avoiding interaction with others. Forming new connections, let alone friendships, was a struggle for her. Her mood would shift frequently, and she was prone to melancholy, with even the smallest thing capable of moving her to tears. As Matthew's pastor career advanced, Mary became increasingly withdrawn. The situation grew more complicated when she became pregnant again, only to learn months later that the fetus had died. This devastating news deeply disturbed Mary, who had been eagerly anticipating the child and dreaming of a large, loving family. It took 2 years for her to see the long-awaited positive pregnancy test, and her joy was overwhelming. However, this time around, Mary concealed her pregnancy for a long time, as if fearful of something. Mrs. Winkler's strange behavior stemmed from childhood trauma and an unhealthy upbringing. Her husband, the family head, was authoritarian, demanding obedience. Behind the facade of a perfect couple, he was violent, often yelling at her without reason. The rumors of the pastor's cruelty spread after Mary appeared with a black eye. Matthew's urge for role-playing and adult toys clashed with Mary's conservative upbringing. She resisted, enraging him, and he tried to force his desires. After abuse, Mary confided in a friend who betrayed her trust, fueling rumors about the clergyman's behavior. Matthew was denied a church leadership promotion and forced to step down from teaching Sunday school due to unfavorable rumors about his personal preferences. His family had to relocate to a new city, where they started fresh. In Selmer, Matthew became a pastor again, and his wife took a part-time job. Despite challenges, they earned the admiration and respect of their community, seen as an exemplary couple and model family. The Winkler family and their neighbors became close friends, often visiting and sharing holidays. Months before the tragedy, Mary bragged about her husband buying a gun for self-defense and taking her to the shooting range. She learned quickly and accurately hit targets. It came out that the Winklers already had guns at home, bought by the pastor for self-defense, which puzzled the guests since they lived in a peaceful town with no enemies. After another move, the couple's financial situation became precarious. Mary sought out various part-time jobs and decided to pursue a medical degree, aiming to work in a clinic and help children in need. However, she soon turned to financial fraud to improve their family's financial standing. Mary later claimed she didn't realize her actions were illegal and intended to pay back the money once she got back on her feet. What Mary did is commonly known as artificially inflating account balances. She received checks from unknown sources, deposited them into a joint bank account with her husband, and then changed the account address so that all communications would be sent there. The total amount of checks received was nearly $177,000, which raised suspicions among bank employees. They invited the couple to the bank branch to clarify the situation, but the Winklers never showed up, further fueling suspicion. Although it was assumed that Matthew was unaware of his wife's actions after his death, Mary tried to convince the court that the fraud was his idea and that he had forced her to make shady transactions while he remained in the background to avoid detection. Mary's disappearance sparks suspicion. Her family's in danger after her husband's murder, and she's initially seen as a victim. But after neighbors' accounts and fraud evidence, she becomes the prime suspect. Authorities must find her, her kids, and the family car to ensure their safety. They're tracing her bank transactions and cell phone signal. Mary was discovered the following day in an Alabama resort town, where she was enjoying quality time with her children at a local amusement park. Apparently, she had planned a special day for them, aware that her impending imprisonment would separate her from her daughters for an extended period. Upon being taken to the police station to provide statements, they recounted a consistent and confident narrative. They claimed that intruders had broken into their home, assaulting their father, and their mother had armed herself to protect them. According to the girls, they were then forced to flee for their safety. Their father was still alive and in the hospital, and they were about to visit him. However, Patricia and Maria Eliza did not witness the events that unfolded in the house. All they knew was that they heard a gunshot, caught a glimpse of their father lying on the floor, and then their mother quickly got them into the car and they drove away. Mary soon began to confess, but claimed she couldn't recall the exact sequence of events due to a temporary memory lapse. According to her, her husband had been abusing her for years, humiliating her and pressuring her into intimate acts that went against her wishes. Mary maintained that it was he who had initiated the financial fraud she had committed. Matthew was known for demanding absolute obedience, had a short temper, and had a history of physical violence, as confirmed by his secretary at his previous job. The woman had frequently witnessed the pastor belittle his wife, who would carefully bring him lunch to church, only to be met with dissatisfaction. The evening before the tragic event, a scandal erupted in the family, prompting the couple to sleep in separate rooms. Mary was distraught, crying throughout the night, and in the morning, she found herself holding a loaded shotgun, which her husband habitually kept at the ready. She entered Matthew's room, where she shot him in the back while he lay in bed. Matthew collapsed to the floor, bloodied foam emanating from his mouth and nose. According to Mary, as her husband lay dying, he whispered, "Why?" To which she responded, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Mary then gathered her daughters and fled the house, leaving her husband, who, as experts later determined, tried to reach for the phone to call for help, but lacked the strength to do so. The murder weapon was later discovered in the trunk of the car in which Mary escaped with the children. However, at the trial, Mary was unable to explain why she had taken the gun with her. The role-playing costumes found in their home were presented as evidence of the pastor's emotional abuse and humiliation of his wife. When Mary saw them, she turned pale and then became hysterical. Despite her inconsistent testimony, the court ultimately believed that Mary Winkler was the victim of domestic abuse and that the murder was a culmination of years of anger, resentment, and pain. However, this did not excuse her from taking responsibility for her actions. In April 2007, the court finally delivered its verdict in this complex case. Mary was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, but the sentence sparked controversy due to her questionable mental state. Initially, she was expected to serve at least 6 years in prison, but ultimately received a sentence of less than a year. During her sentence, she spent 2 months in a psychiatric hospital where doctors assessed her ability to regain custody of her children. Upon her release in the summer of 2008, Mary was granted sole custody of her daughters, who had been living with their paternal grandparents. Matthew's parents were outraged, believing that Mary had deliberately killed their son and received a lenient sentence. They felt she should not have been given custody of the girls, but all their attempts to appeal the decision failed. The fraud case was never brought to trial because the bank failed to file formal charges, and as a result, the matter was completely dropped. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christina Ann Thompson Harris. Christina Ann Thompson and Jason Thomas Harris, 40, had been married for 11 years as of 2014, having tied the knot in 2003 following a 5-year courtship. The couple welcomed their first child in 2009, which brought about significant lifestyle changes. Despite the challenges that came with parenthood and daily responsibilities, they appeared to be content with their new life. Christina managed the household and cared for their child, while Jason worked at a plastics factory. As their child grew older, Christina had the opportunity to contribute to the family income by getting a job, However, in May 2014, she had to take maternity leave due to her second pregnancy. Their daughter was born healthy, but tragically, she would only get to see her mother through photographs as she grew up. On September 29, 2014, Jason had a brief conversation with his wife Christina before leaving for work. Despite being unwell with a cold and severe cough that had disrupted her sleep, Christina reassured Jason she was okay. However, a few hours later, Jason grew concerned when Christina didn't answer his call to check on her. Unsuccessful in reaching his wife, Jason asked a neighbor to visit their home and check on Christina, explaining her condition and unavailability. The neighbor found the front door unlocked, and upon entering the bedroom, discovered Christina lying unresponsive on the bed. The neighbor promptly called 911 and then sought help from another neighbor, a registered nurse, who sadly confirmed Christina's death after checking her pulse. 2 days after Christina's death, the medical examiner determined that the cause was an overdose of a banned substance. This verdict stunned her family and friends, who were convinced she had never touched illegal drugs. Christina's mother, Kathy May, disputed the finding and told the police that her daughter had seemed well when they last met, the day before her death. The police then questioned Jason Harris's claim that his wife was battling a cold. According to Kathy May, Christina had confided in her about the difficulties in her marriage to Jason, who was unhappy but reluctant to divorce due to concerns about child support and custody of their 2 kids. The neighbors who discovered Christina's body provided the police with some interesting information. They claimed that Jason had told them that the night before his wife's death, he had made her a bowl of cereal with milk, and while they were eating, Christina suddenly lost consciousness and dropped the plate. The police were aware that it would be difficult for Christina's loved ones to accept that someone they knew so well had a secret dark side. However, as the investigation progressed, the police began to question whether Christina had indeed taken any illegal substances. Despite the official findings, Christina's family refused to give up, convinced that Jason Harris was involved in her death. Christina's mother and sisters persuaded the police to test her breast milk, which led to a historic first in Michigan, using breast milk as evidence. Despite the trust of her family, neighbors, and colleagues that Christina didn't use illegal substances, her milk was tested. Notably, her workplace and the hospital where she gave birth to her second child had already tested her for prohibited substances, with negative results. At the time of Christina's death, her second child was 4 months old, and she had been breastfeeding. Both Christina's mother and Harris confirmed that she was cautious about her consumption due to breastfeeding, as she didn't want to harm her baby. Christina would express and freeze her breast milk, with some bags stored at her mother's house. The police examined 3 dated bags of frozen milk, which revealed no traces of banned substances. The expert analysis included milk samples frozen shortly before Christina's death, indicating she didn't consume the substance that caused her death. Only one person claimed that Christina had used banned substances, and that was Jason Harris's sister. This led investigators to take a closer look at Jason and consider the possibility that Christina's death was a deliberate act of deprivation of life. The investigation was slow going, and it's unclear how it would have turned out if Christina's family hadn't been actively involved in uncovering the truth. Christina's mother constantly reminded the Davidson police about her daughter, and in August 2016, almost 2 years after Christina's death, Kathy Mays successfully got the Davidson police to hand the case over to the Michigan State Police, with new investigators taking over. As the story unfolded, they discovered a lot of information about Jason Harris's character and behavior before and after his wife's death. Harris had been having multiple affairs, and Christina was aware of them, confiding in family and coworkers that Harris had been texting another woman even while she was in the hospital giving birth to their youngest child via C-section. Christina told a coworker that if she turned up dead, it would be because of Harris. and when asked if she was serious, she confirmed that she was. Harris told his co-workers that he doubted the paternity of their second child and often complained that after giving birth, Christina was depressed, staying in bed and refusing to go to work. He also frequently complained about her nagging him. One of Harris's co-workers believed that Harris might have told the police that he had expressed a wish for Christina to be dead. He described Harris and Christina's relationship as toxic, recalling that they frequently argued. One of the most astonishing aspects of this case was Jason Harris's openness about wanting to get rid of his wife, Christina. Despite making attempts to harm her, nobody took his words and actions seriously until her death. Harris purchased substances which he mixed into her drinks on at least 2 occasions. However, Christina detected an unusual taste and refused to consume the beverages. He then asked a co-worker for a substance that would not alter the taste or smell of drinks or food, claiming he wanted to knock her out so she wouldn't feel anything. When Harris told a co-worker that Christina didn't drink the tainted water because of its funny taste, the co-worker declined to provide him with more pills. The co-worker testified that Harris had told him he wanted Christina to stop nagging him, but the co-worker thought Harris was joking. Harris even told a co-worker that he had hired someone to kill Christina, but the hitman was arrested before he could carry out the task. Harris then asked the same co-worker to kill Christina in exchange for $10,000 from her $100,000 life insurance policy. The co-worker refused, believing Harris was venting frustrations and that the offer was merely a poor joke. He remembered the conversation as Harris saying, "I'm tired of her, I'm going to get rid of her." On September 29, 2014, Harris dropped off his 2 children at daycare on his way to work. Later that morning, he sent a text to a neighbor asking her to check on his wife Christina because she wasn't answering his calls. The neighbor arrived at the house and saw the family van in the driveway, but Christina didn't come to the door. The neighbor entered the house and found Christina lying unresponsive in bed. She asked Harris if she should try to wake her up, and he said Christina had probably overslept and that he was on his way home. The neighbor then went back inside and found Christina feeling cold, with foam coming from her mouth and nose. She called 911 and another neighbor who was a registered nurse. The 911 operator asked if there were any needles present, but the neighbor didn't see any. The registered nurse neighbor testified that Christina was cold, stiff, had no pulse, and had white foam coming from her mouth. She didn't attempt to resuscitate Christina because she was already dead. When the paramedics arrived, they pronounced Christina dead at the scene. Harris informed his supervisor that he had requested a neighbor to check on Christina and that he needed to return home because Christina was unresponsive when he arrived at the house. However, witnesses reported that Harris did not appear concerned or rushed, and he entered the house without notifying the neighbor he had asked to check on Christina. Later that morning, Harris contacted Christina's supervisor at work, informing her that Christina had passed away the previous night and inquiring about collecting the $100,000 death benefit on Christina's life insurance policy through her employer. One of the women with whom Harris was intimate told investigators that Harris reached out to her on the day of Christina's death, claiming that his wife had died from taking an excessive amount of a banned substance, implying that he knew the cause of Christina's death before the medical examiner's report. That evening, the neighbor Harris had asked to check on Christina saw him in the driveway. Harris stated that Christina was not the angel her parents thought she was, and that their child would soon learn all the good and bad about Christina. He claimed that Christina had dropped her bowl of cereal and that he told her to go to bed. Harris also told the neighbor that his wife was restless, tossing, turning, and thrashing around during the night, and that he had heard her cough before he left for work, wondering if that had been her last breath. Harris told a police officer that Christina had been coughing a lot when he left the home, and that Christina had fallen asleep while eating cereal the night before her death. Finally, Harris informed Christina's mother that Christina had complained about her water tasting of chemicals before she died. In this case, a key motive was financial gain. Within a week of Christina's death, Harris and his mother personally visited Christina's workplace to ask about her life insurance payout. Moreover, Harris received a $20,000 death benefit from his employer's life insurance policy soon after Christina's death. One of Harris's mistresses moved in with him and his children. Although Christina's mother thought the mistress moved in after the funeral, Harris's neighbor testified that the mistress had already moved in before the funeral. The neighbor also stated that Harris's adult children from a previous marriage moved into the house just days after Christina's death. Police found that Jason Harris had bought a plane ticket to Rhode Island 9 days after Christina's death to visit a woman he had exchanged over 5,800 texts with. The county medical examiner, Dr. Brian Hunter, sent Christina's post-mortem blood and urine samples to a lab for testing. Initially, Dr. Hunter thought Christina's death was an accident, but there were no needle marks on her body, and investigators didn't find any drug residue or rolling paper near the bed where she died. In 2016, the Michigan State Police took over the investigation into Christina's death. Later, in 2019, after being questioned in a wrongful death lawsuit brought by Christina's family, and after reviewing the police file, Dr. Hunter changed the manner of Christina's death on her death certificate and post-mortem report from accidental to homicide. The police charged Harris with first-degree murder, solicitation of murder, and delivery of a controlled substance causing death. He was refused bail. Nicholas Robinson, Harris's attorney, said his client has pled not guilty to this matter and looks forward to contesting these charges. By the time of his arrest, Harris had lost his job due to a positive test for banned substances. The efforts made by Kathy Mays to ensure that law enforcement agencies punish the perpetrator of her daughter's death did not go unnoticed. Genesee County Prosecutor David Layton said that a few years back, he started receiving Facebook and email messages from a woman from Davidson, claiming that her daughter had recently died and that it was not an accident. The woman, Kathy Mays, was able to capture Layton's attention, and authorities began reviewing the death of her daughter. Kathy Mays recalled the words her daughter's mother wrote in an email. "Mr. Prosecutor, you are my last hope, the last chance we have to see justice through for my daughter. Please help me." Layton stated, "I was, and remain to this day, thoroughly convinced that her daughter's death was not accidental, but rather the result of foul play. However, it was Mays's relentless pursuit of justice for her daughter that ultimately led to this moment. And it is her effort that prompted Layton and his office to present her with the Crime Victim Advocate of the Year award." Mays thanked Layton for the award, presented to her in a room filled with about 40 people. Mays said, "The accused have well-defined rights, but the victim's rights are not so defined. Communicate through email, phone calls, talking to people, and learn the jargon that's coming at you from the professionals. You are your loved one's best advocate." Mays recounted that in September 2014, she received a call informing her that her daughter had not woken up, and instantly she suspected her husband's involvement. Through her journey to becoming a victim's advocate, a role she was previously unaware of, Mays shared the valuable lessons she learned. Victims should not take for granted that an investigation will occur, and even if one does, it's not guaranteed that the investigators will have the necessary expertise in the specific crime they're investigating. It's essential to be proactive rather than passive when seeking justice for your loved one. Moreover, don't expect to receive regular or progress updates. The trial started in 2021. Prosecutors alleged that Harris intentionally laced his wife's cereal with a prohibited substance, aiming to end her life. He then went to work, waited a few hours, and asked the neighbor to check on Christina Harris, seemingly wanting someone else to discover her lifeless body, thereby diverting suspicion from himself. According to the prosecutor, Harris had multiple motives for killing Christina. He was involved with other women, suspected her of infidelity, doubted the paternity of their second child, and was frustrated with her constant nagging. Harris openly confessed to multiple individuals that he was against divorce, unwilling to pay child support, and unwilling to lose custody of their children. Prior to Christina's death, he confided in a coworker that he wished she would pass away on the morning of her actual death. Harris contacted Christina's employer to inquire about a $100,000 life insurance policy, and during this conversation, he falsely claimed that Christina had died the previous night. The jury was presented with conclusive proof that Harris wanted Christina dead and had even attempted to hire an assassin. He had devised a plan to achieve this and was aware of where to obtain illegal substances. In fact, he repeatedly purchased these substances with the intention of administering them to Christina. Multiple witnesses testified during the trial that Christina refrained from recreational drug use and was meticulous about what she consumed, given her breastfeeding responsibilities. Furthermore, tests on her frozen breast milk yielded negative results for the substances, lending credence to the theory that Harris had contaminated Christina's food. Prosecution presented the results of the toxicological examination, and Dr. Judge stated that Christina's death was compatible with swallowing a substance. The prosecution dismissed the possibility of an injection because there were no injection marks or a needle found. Dr. Judge added that it was also unlikely that the substance was snorted, as neither a rolled-up dollar bill nor any paper used for this purpose was found at the scene. Jason Harris was given the opportunity to address the court, but he failed to apologize or express remorse. Instead, he maintained his innocence. The jury, however, saw through his deception and revealed him to be a selfish, murderous, and dishonest individual, as the judge remarked on November 17, 2021. The jury ultimately found 47-year-old Harris guilty on all charges brought against him. 3 weeks later, the court sentenced Harris to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Undeterred, Harris proceeded to appeal the verdict. In a statement, prosecutor David Layton extended his sincerest condolences to the family and friends of Christina Harris, describing the case as tragic and hoping that the verdict would bring some measure of comfort as they continued to mourn. Harris requested a new trial, citing his trial lawyer's ineffective assistance. Specifically, he argued that his lawyer failed to obtain an independent expert opinion on the prosecution's evidence and did not consult with an independent toxicologist. The lawyer's trial strategy had been to show that Dr. Hunter's opinion on the manner of death was based on flawed information. The prosecution responded by submitting an affidavit from Jason Harris's trial lawyer, who clarified that he had chosen not to obtain an independent expert opinion to counter the prosecution's expert witness. Instead, his strategy was to highlight that Dr. Hunter had altered his opinion on the manner of death due to being presented with inaccurate information and circumstances over a 3-year period, which was influenced by pressure from the victim's family. In February 2024, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld Jason Harris's conviction, and as a result, he will spend the rest of his life in prison with no possibility of parole. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Young. Jason Young comes from Brevard, North Carolina, where he was born in 1974. He grew up in an ordinary family. After graduating from high school, he became a student at the prestigious state university in the capital of his native state, the city of Raleigh. And after graduating, got a job as a salesman in a large retail chain. At work, Jason Young proved himself to be a valuable and promising employee who could always be relied on. But friends spoke of him as a man who was windy and fickle in relations with the opposite sex. He was fickle and often changed women, for which he got a reputation as a womanizer, which, however, he himself was even proud of. Michelle Marie Fisher was born in New York in February 1977. She was raised with her younger sibling Meredith, with whom they were very close from childhood. Their mother, Linda, spent a lot of time with her adored daughters, tried to support them in everything, and contributed to the development of their abilities and talents. Since her school years, Michelle was fond of law and economics, dreaming of linking her life with this very activity. After graduating from school, she applied to several universities at once, and soon received a positive answer from the capital of North Carolina. The girl diligently studied at the Faculty of Economics and Law, receiving a master's degree in this field. After receiving her diploma, Michelle was hired for a high position in one of the leading accounting firms in the state. Yesterday's student was earning well, fully supporting herself, and making big plans for the future. She decided to celebrate her 24th birthday at one of the most popular entertainment venues in the city with her close friends and colleagues. They were heartily enjoying themselves when some stranger awkwardly turned around and knocked a glass with a cocktail out of the birthday girl's hands. The guy immediately started apologizing and, to make amends, bought Michelle another cocktail. That young man was Jason Young, and the pretty young Michelle immediately caught his eye. He sat down at her table and started a casual conversation, joked a lot, tried to be witty and interesting, and at the end of the evening asked her out on a date. Michelle also liked the casual acquaintance, so she willingly accepted his invitation, deciding that it was fate itself made her a gift on her birthday. The couple began to communicate, and soon they realized that they had a lot in common. They both studied at the same university. Although Jason got his degree 3 years earlier, supported the same hockey team, and were fans of the same music group. Between young people quickly began a romantic relationship. But to live together, let alone get married, was out of the question at the start of his relationship with Michelle. Jason was still living at his parents' house in Ballard, and he would only visit his girlfriend in Raleigh on weekends or meet with her during work trips to the state capital. During one of these meetings, his sweetheart informed him that she was pregnant. This news was a real shock for both of them because neither of them was ready for the birth of a child. They were focused on their careers, confidently climbing the ladder, and did not plan to start a family yet. Jason said so at once, but after some hesitation, Michelle decided that she would not have an abortion and would keep the baby. Jason took about a month to rethink the situation, after which he moved to Raleigh to be near his pregnant girlfriend. After a few more months, the couple officially legalized their relationship, not out of love or pregnancy, but due to Michelle's lack of health insurance. Childbirth would have cost the couple a considerable amount of money, but marriage gave them the opportunity to avoid such expenses. The couple's daughter, Young, was born in the spring of 2004. She was given the name Cassidy Elizabeth. The newly married mother went headlong into domestic life and family chores, and her mother and younger sister helped her with this. It should be noted that Michelle's family coolly accepted her chosen one. They were wary of Jason, but tried to avoid conflicts. In the same year, they with a child moved to their own large house located in a quiet and landscaped area of the city. Mother Linda, who came to visit her daughter and granddaughter and help with the household, was the first to notice that there was a certain tense atmosphere in this family. Son-in-law Jason was too emotional and could potentially cause a strain right on the spot. But Michelle made every effort to resolve all the argumentative. In public, she behaved like the happiest wife and mother. Only Mother Linda could honestly describe what was truly occurring. An ominous omen occurred when Cassidy was barely 2 years old. Michelle became pregnant again, and she broke the news to her spouse, but he reacted calmly and seemed even happy about it. Soon, the family traveled by car to Brevard to personally inform Jason's parents of the happy news. They came to visit only for the weekend, and on the first day, they celebrated the upcoming addition to their circle of relatives. The next day, leaving their young daughter with her grandparents for a couple of hours, the couple went to a restaurant to celebrate the event together. As the couple was driving home, Jason, who was at the wheel, excessive steering, and the car went off the road and into a ravine. The couple were shaken but sustained only a few abrasions and bruises, and their lives were not in danger. However, Michelle had a miscarriage. Jason, on the other hand, took the news surprisingly calmly. The accident, the loss of a child, and some strange indifference of the husband, all this looked very suspicious. Later, Linda Fisher would call that accident a bad omen that no one paid proper attention to at the time. They had a mutual friend named Michelle Manny, whom they had known since their days at the same university. For some time, they did not see each other, but in the spring of 2006, shortly before the accident, Jason, during a work trip, accidentally met an old acquaintance. He told his wife about it, and together they decided to invite Manny to visit him. The young woman willingly accepted the invitation, but during her visit, she began to complain about her unhappy family life and problems in her relationship with her husband. At the same time, she constantly praised Jason and told his wife how lucky she was. Jason had frequently flirted with various women in the past, but this particular relationship quickly evolved beyond mere flirtation and friendly support. Jason Young and Michelle Manny started calling each other almost daily and secretly meeting up. Jason consistently explained his absences as being due to business trips, and his wife remained unaware of the truth. In the summer of 2006, Michelle informed her husband that she was pregnant again, but this time Jason was not happy at all. The wife did not understand what was happening. She felt that the beloved was away from her, but believed that this was due to the miscarriage that occurred a few months ago. Jason himself all this time was thinking hard about how to get rid of marital bonds with the least loss to himself. In early November, when Michelle was 5 months pregnant, her husband had another business trip. He traveled 300 miles away from home in his own car, but had booked a hotel room about halfway through the trip. That evening, a pregnant Michelle had a long conversation with her best friend on the phone, telling her about problems in the family and mentioning that she had had a big fight with her husband the night before he left. After the conversation, she went upstairs, put her daughter to bed and fell asleep next to her. About 10 in the evening, Jason reached the hotel and, as he claimed to be tired from the road, went straight to bed. In reality, he was scrutinizing all the entrances, exits, and the location of the security cameras, planning how to leave the hotel and then return undetected, preparing an ironclad alibi for what he thought would be the perfect crime. In the early morning hours, Jason called his wife's sister to ask for help. He said he wanted to give his wife a piece of jewelry for their wedding anniversary, but he had accidentally sent a page from an online store to the home fax machine. He worried that Michelle would see his gift and there would be no surprise. Meredith, though she disliked her son-in-law, still agreed to help him. The police chiefs of Wake County received a 911 call at 1:30 p.m. from 5108 Birchleaf Drive, the Enchanted Oaks area, after Meredith Fisher found her sister Michelle lying face down in a pool of blood in her bedroom. Fisher told the 911 dispatcher that she thinks her sister is dead. It looks like there are bloody footprints all over the house, like the little footprints of Michelle's daughter. Michelle Young died from severe injuries, having been struck in the head at least 10 times during a struggle. When Meredith arrived at her sister's house, she entered through a secret door in the garage that only family members knew about, and that was always unlocked. The house was suspiciously quiet, although the landlady's papers, keys, and wallet were in the hallway, indicating that she hadn't gone anywhere. When she went upstairs, Meredith saw that the bedroom door was wide open, but neither her sister nor her niece answered her call. When she walked into the room, she was met with a horrifying sight. Michelle lay on the floor next to the bed with a fractured skull, in a pool of her own blood. Blood was everywhere. On the walls, the furniture, and bloody child-sized footprints were visible next to the body. Sadly, there was nothing that could be done for the pregnant woman, as she had been dead for hours. Her sister quickly called for emergency assistance. Suddenly, she heard rustling under the bed, looked there, and saw little Cassidy, who looked at her incomprehensibly. Cassidy was not hurt, but she was frightened. The girl saw her mother's death and afterwards spent many hours by her body, as evidenced by the marks on the floor as well as the toys she brought to her mother. Later, forensic experts found a huge number of bruises, abrasions, and fractures on the body of the deceased, which spoke of a long and brutal beating. Michelle's teeth were knocked out, and her skull was fractured with a blunt, heavy object. Later, this instrument of crime was never found. A bloody pillow was lying next to the body, and the marks indicated that the victim had been smothered with it. Nothing was stolen from the house, which means that the night visitor had only one goal: murder. In addition, the locks had not been broken, and there were no signs of forced entry, indicating that the perpetrator had a key or knew about the secret door, which again was known only to family members. In such cases, the main suspect is typically the spouse of the deceased, but in this instance, the individual had an apparently flawless alibi. He asserted that he checked into his hotel room and did not depart until the following morning, when he attended a scheduled business meeting. A review of the records confirmed that Jason had used his room keycard in the evening to enter and in the morning to exit. However, a thorough investigation subsequently uncovered a multitude of irregularities and contradictions. For example, a hotel employee discovered early in the morning that the emergency exit was not only open, but also propped up with a cobblestone to prevent the door from slamming shut. When the investigation decided to check the surveillance camera pointed at that door to find out who had done it, it turned out that this very same camera had been deliberately disabled on the night of the crime. Moreover, it stopped recording about half an hour after Jason checked into his room. The weirdness didn't end there. It turned out that during the night, a man who looked like Jason was getting gas at a station between the hotel and the crime scene, but during the night, he was asked to provide identification as per the rules. He refused to do so, paid cash, and without waiting, quickly left the gas station. The attendant at the inquest identified Jason Young, but the man continued to deny everything, insisting that he had slept in his hotel room during the night. Another oddity was that on the day before the tragedy, Jason called Michelle more than 24 times, and closer to morning, he called his mistress 5 more times, with each conversation lasting no more than 15 seconds. This suggests that Jason was probably panicking, and all of these calls were made outside the hotel, where he, in his own words, had been all night. He was also late for a scheduled business meeting with his partners, and looked somewhat confused. However, none of this evidence, either individually or all of them together, proved that Jason had indeed massacred his pregnant wife. Years of investigation and a long-awaited verdict. For almost 3 years, Jason lived the life he'd always lived. Moreover, he achieved custody of his young daughter, which was a serious blow to the relatives of his dead wife. By that time, he stopped hiding his relationship with Manny, who was once friends with the murdered Michelle, which only increased suspicion that it was Jason who committed this brutal crime. Jason was arrested only at the end of 2009, but then, despite the large amount of evidence to prove his guilt, the case failed because the jury did not come to a consensus. However, the case was reopened in 2012 when more evidence was collected, and the testimony of witnesses who saw Jason Young that night outside the hotel in different places, in particular, his rather conspicuous white car, was seen parked on the night of the murder, not far from his own house in an unlit lot, was also included in the case. Also included in the case was the testimony of a child psychologist who told of little Cassidy's strange doll play, during which the girl showed how her daddy spanked her mom, and then she would not get up off the floor. Mani took the stand as a witness in court. She confessed that Jason had cheated on his wife with her, but justified it by saying that he was deeply unhappy in his family life, as he told everyone. Another former mistress of the defendant admitted that she was afraid of his outbursts of anger when he lost control and could hit her. After a long trial, Jason Young was finally found guilty of brutally assaulting his pregnant wife. For this crime, he was sent to prison for life with no right to ever be released. In 2014, convicted Jason filed his first appeal, but it was denied. In 2018, he again asked for a review of his case, but a panel of the State Court of Appeals again denied it. Cassidy was virtually orphaned. Her mother was murdered and her father went to prison for the crime. The girl is being raised by her aunt and maternal grandparents. On November 9, 2006, the body of Michelle Young was laid to rest. This marked the end of a chapter in her life. Michelle Young's death caused a lot of commotion and uproar in the community, as the reasons and circumstances leading to her death. Both locals and strangers felt saddened and outraged that a precious life had departed so suddenly. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. When an obsession transforms a quiet individual into a monster, it parallels many grave addictions akin to severe illnesses with psychological, biological, or social roots. This case involves a destructive habit. Whether it's an urge for alcohol, prohibited substances, gambling, or an obsessive need for a particular activity or interaction with a certain person or group, it's tragic. Addiction affects not just the individual, but also their loved ones who genuinely strive to help. The once prosperous and happy Amato family faced such a dilemma head-on. As all family members were healthcare professionals, they believed they could manage the situation without external assistance. However, by the time they recognized the severity of the issue, it was regrettably too late. This isn't merely a story of addiction, but of a young man's extreme obsession with a woman he had never met in person. Compounded by his addiction to forbidden substances and a pathological inclination towards theft, the situation spiraled into a horrifying outcome. Let's delve into this case to understand if there was any chance to alter the course of events and prevent the tragedy. Bloodshed at the family home occurred on January 25, 2019. A concerned man contacted the Soule County Police in Florida. He reported that his close friend and colleague, Cody Amato, a nurse, unexpectedly didn't show up for his shift at the hospital, which was highly unusual for him. The day before, Cody had left work about 15 minutes early due to some urgent family issues at home. He departed so hastily he even forgot to collect his pay for the day. Attempts to reach the 31-year-old Cody by phone were unsuccessful. He simply wasn't answering. His girlfriend stated that Cody went to his parents' house the previous day at his father's request, but never returned to her place. She too couldn't reach him. All these signs triggered alarming thoughts and prompted the dispatch of police officers to the provided address. The Amato family home, located in a suburb of Orlando, featured a large adjoining area with a stable and a horse walking area. Cody's car was parked in the driveway. Lights were on in several rooms of the house. Everything seemed ordinary at first glance. Doors and windows were intact. When the sheriff's deputy knocked, there was no response. Calls to the landline also went unanswered. The police then sought permission to enter. Upon approval, they cautiously unlocked the back door using a knife to slide the bolt. Inside, an eerie silence pervaded, although the lit rooms suggested someone must be present. Indeed, the homeowners were there. The officers first discovered the lifeless body of 59-year-old Chad Amato, lying on the kitchen floor in a pool of his own blood, with 2 close-range gunshot wounds to his chest. Next, at the staircase opposite the main entrance, they found Cody curled up and also deceased in a massive pool of blood. Lastly, 61-year-old Margaret Amato was found sitting at her computer in the home office. At first glance, she seemed to be napping with her head resting on her arm. However, blood splatters on the monitor and a large spreading stain beneath her head. The murder weapon, an IWE Jericho 941 pistol, was found next to Cody's body and later determined by forensic experts to have his fingerprints on it. There were no signs of break-in or external presence, and nothing appeared missing from the house. Initially, It seemed like Cody might have ended their lives after a family dispute before shooting himself in the chest. However, smeared blood on the front door suggested it was locked by someone leaving after the incident, indicating that the perpetrator wasn't among the deceased family members. Regarding a suspect, those familiar with or connected to the Amato family had little doubt. They pointed to their youngest son, 30-year-old Grant Amato. Grant had been missing since that evening. His car, a white Honda, along with some personal items such as a laptop from his room, were gone, implying that he had taken them with him. Grant was identified as a suspect, prompting a search to locate his whereabouts. Here's what we know about the Amato family. Margaret Amato, née Wade, married Chad Robert Amato in the mid-1990s. Margaret, 2 years older than Chad, was raising a 3-year-old son, Jason, from a marriage. Chad wasn't dissuaded by the fact she had a child. Instead, he embraced Jason as his own. In 1988, they welcomed their first child together, Cody. Their youngest son, Grant Tyan Amato, was born on May 20th, 1989. From childhood, the brothers shared a close bond. Raised in an affluent family environment, they rarely faced adversity. However, to enjoy certain privileges, they had to follow family rules, excel academically, help with chores, and demonstrate good behavior. Their parents held advanced degrees in healthcare. Margaret was a senior operational manager at a reputable private clinic, while Chad initially worked as a clinical pharmacist before transitioning to software specialization. The family's financial status allowed them to live comfortably in a spacious suburban home and indulge in breeding thoroughbred racehorses as a hobby. Jason left home at 18 after finishing high school to attend university and build his own life. He got married and settled down with his family in another state, but maintained close ties with his parents and younger brothers. Cody and Grant were nearly inseparable, attending the same school and joining the same sports teams. They also regularly visited the shooting range on weekends with their father. The Amatos had an impressive firearm collection, featuring rare pieces available only to Chad for safety reasons. Grant was the youngest of the 3 sons, and naturally received much attention and care from everyone due to his frail and sickly nature as a child. This made him grow up shy and modest, finding it challenging to connect with peers outside of his brothers. Grant became particularly close to Cody after Jason grew up and left home following high school graduation. Eventually, both brothers pursued medical degrees and became anesthesiologists. Cody excelled in his studies, becoming the top student in his class. Both managed to land jobs in their field at a hospital. Cody a reputation as a reliable professional, but Grant frequently got into trouble and made errors, often needing his work double-checked. In the summer of 2018, Grant's career at the hospital ended scandalously. He was caught stealing strictly controlled sedatives, which caused euphoria and hallucinations, and were used rarely for anesthesia. The discovery led to police involvement, and Grant was arrested. During interrogation, he admitted to the theft, claiming he administered the drugs to patients who, in his opinion, were under-medicated. Many believed Grant was using or selling the drugs illegally, though there was no direct evidence of this. He was immediately suspended and later fired. His criminal case for theft was eventually dismissed, reportedly due to his parents' intervention. Unemployed and dependent on the internet after losing his job, the 29-year-old man, already a loner, became even more withdrawn. He spent weeks indoors, glued to his computer, mostly browsing adult websites. Grant never had a girlfriend and struggled with social interactions with women, leaving him feeling inadequate. He indulged in viewing adult content and frequently interacted with webcam models on specialized platforms, trying to fill the void of a non-existent personal life. This private interaction naturally came at a cost. Grant easily accessed funds from his parents' and older brothers' accounts for these activities. This obsession quickly spiraled into an addiction compounded by regular alcohol consumption. Yet Grant seemed content with this lifestyle, living off his family and spending their money without contributing anything in return. Eventually, his father issued an ultimatum: find a job soon, or he would have to leave home and lose any financial support from the family. Grant promised his father to resolve the issue but had no real intention of seeking employment. He claimed he would become a streamer, earning by broadcasting video games. Grant's parents, considering it better than nothing, agreed to set up a streaming station for him. In reality, he was locked in his room indulging in his favorite pastime, visiting adult-only websites. In August 2018, Cody took a vacation from work and decided to embark on a journey across the globe for a change of. He dreamed of visiting Japan and invited his younger brother Grant and his best friend Jeremy. While Cody and Jeremy funded their trip independently, Grant's vacation was financed by their parents. However, instead of giving the money directly to Grant, they entrusted it to Cody, who was seen as the more responsible of the two. The trip lasted nearly 2 weeks. Throughout it, Grant seemed disengaged and showed little interest in tours or landmarks. He was constantly fixated on his smartphone screen and often stayed back at the hotel using his brother's laptop. One day when the group went to Lake Kawaguchi near Mount Fuji, Jeremy accidentally left his credit card in their hotel room. Seizing the opportunity, Grant hacked into Jeremy's account and withdrew thousands of dollars. He spent it all on private sessions with his favorite webcam model. Jeremy discovered the theft later, but initially suspected fraud. He couldn't pinpoint the culprit and continued investigating after returning home, unaware that Grant was responsible. About the identity of the mysterious webcam model, who became an obsession for Grant. On a site where he paid for private online interactions with various women, he met Sylvia Venizlavova from Bulgaria, known as Silly. She captivated him with her striking looks and confidence. Sylvia's charisma and passion made Grant feel special, loved, desired, and unique. He really thought her feelings for him were genuine. He believed they could have a real relationship. Grant was sure they were together and needed to win over this fiery brunette from all her admirers. He spent hours and thousands of dollars daily to ensure she had no time for other men. Grant also showered her with gifts like expensive lingerie and jewelry, which she wore during their video chats. Desperate to impress Sylvia, Grant constantly fabricated stories and lost touch with reality. He claimed he lived alone in a large house, owned a successful business, and could afford to lavish her with money. To back up his claims, he made money transfers, initially sending a couple thousand, then $10,000, and even $100,000 as a birthday gift. Naturally, Grant's lavish spending did not go unnoticed by his parents, since he was using their accounts. At first, he explained these expenditures as investments in his own online project to attract an audience. But Chad and Margaret quickly realized their son was lying. A serious family dispute erupted at home. The father demanded that the youngest son immediately pack his things and leave. But his mother and Cody intervened on Grant's behalf. The family understood that Grant was suffering from severe internet addiction, but they were baffled about how he had spent nearly $200,000 from their accounts. A thorough search in his room uncovered vials of potent substances. Grant explained he used them to keep from going insane. The parents announced they would cut off his access to their accounts and intended to send him for mandatory treatment for drug and internet addiction. In response, Grant declared he was tired of everything and ready to end his life. He then dashed out of the house, jumped into his car, and sped away at high speed in an unknown direction. Later, it was discovered that Grant went to his aunt and uncle's house, where he crashed through their fence and hit the garage wall. Aware of the turmoil in the Amato family, his relatives sympathized with him and offered him a place to stay until things settled down. He readily agreed, but ended up robbing his kind-hearted relatives instead. The following day, thousands of dollars were stolen from several accounts. The funds were used to pay for interactions with Sylvie. When Grant's aunt informed his parents, they asked her not to involve the police, promising to resolve the issue and return the stolen money promptly. That same day, Chad personally went to their house and took Grant home. Chad, Margaret, and Cody soon realized that reasoning with Grant was futile. If he left home, he would likely commit theft again. They then presented Grant with a stark choice. He could either go to a rehabilitation clinic for treatment of his addictions or face jail time for theft. Reluctantly, Grant agreed to enter the clinic where he would spend 2 months away from any temptations. He was admitted to the medical institution at the end of December 2018. During his treatment, Grant's parents checked his computer and discovered how he had been spending thousands of dollars daily from their family accounts. They found Sylvie's profile, the woman who had deeply influenced their son, and reviewed their correspondence, finding hundreds of recordings of their private online interactions. These were moments that Grant treasured and often revisited. The Amiss family decided to inform Sylvie about her admirer. They revealed that the man who had showered her with money and gifts was not a businessman, but an unemployed individual with drug and internet addictions. They also pointed out that the funds Grant transferred were stolen, potentially subjecting him to criminal charges. However, Sylvie remained indifferent, as for her, it was just a job, and she had no intention of returning the money. On January 5, 2019, just a couple of weeks into his treatment, Grant unexpectedly returned home after completing less than a quarter of the necessary rehabilitation program. He had fled the clinic where he was noted for his lack of compliance. Tearfully vowing to turn his life around and find employment, Grant threatened to end his life if forced back into the rehab center. Grant's parents agreed to give him a chance, but imposed strict rules. He was forbidden from using the computer, had to adhere to a schedule, and his earnings were closely monitored. Additionally, he took up a part-time job at a local grocery warehouse. For about 3 weeks, Grant appeared compliant, leading his parents to believe he had matured and left his behind. However, this changed on Thursday, January 24, 2019. On that day, Grant persuaded his mother to let him use the laptop briefly. He claimed he needed it to check his email and post his resume online in search of a more ambitious job than his current warehouse position. Trusting her son, Margaret allowed him access to the laptop, a decision that proved fatal. Naturally, one of Grant's first actions was to contact Sylvie. To his dismay, he discovered that his parents had already written to her, exposing the truth about him. He perceived this as a betrayal. In Grant's view, they had humiliated him in front of the only woman he loved, and he decided they had to pay for that. Remember the home gun collection previously mentioned? Chad had kept most of it in a special large safe for which no one else had the key. Nonetheless, Grant knew about another gun stored in his parents' bedroom, which was always kept loaded by his father. This was the weapon he decided to use. His mother was sitting at the computer in the home office when Grant approached her quietly from behind and shot her in the back of the head. The position of her body suggested she didn't have time to turn around or understand what was happening. His next target was his father, Chad, who would soon be returning home from work. As soon as Chad entered the kitchen, he was confronted face-to-face with Grant and immediately received 2 bullets to the chest. Grant tensely contemplated his next move and devised an even more monstrous plan. He decided to frame his own brother, Cody. Cody had always stood up for Grant and was considered his best friend. By that time, Cody had moved out of the family home and was living separately with his girlfriend. To carry out his plan, Grant needed to lure Cody back home. Grant, using his now deceased father's phone, sent several messages urging his brother to return home immediately due to an undefined emergency. He didn't provide details, confident that this would prompt a quick response. His assumption proved accurate. Cody left work early and hurried home. Upon entering the house, he barely reached the bottom of the staircase leading to the 2nd floor before being shot and collapsing. Cody didn't die instantly. He realized the gravity of the situation, but was powerless to act. Afterwards, Grant methodically wiped fingerprints off the pistol and placed it in Cody's hand to leave prints, staging the scene to suggest Cody had shot their parents and then himself. The rest of the evening, Grant calmly packed his belongings, downloaded communication files with Sylvie from the computer, and even texted her. Having concluded his tasks, he loaded essentials into his car and drove away. The police quickly tracked Grant down and arrested him at a small roadside motel in Orange County, within just over a day. He wasn't surprised but expressed disappointment at being found so quickly while staunchly denying guilt during interrogation. He concocted tales of his father's alleged cruelty toward himself, his mother, and brother. Grant claimed that his father tried to separate him from his girlfriend Sylvie, whom he professed true love for. Regarding the tragic events at their family home on January 24, 2019, Grant's account was confusing and inconsistent. He suggested there had been a fight between his father and brother. According to him, Cody grabbed a gun and killed Chad, with Margaret becoming an accidental victim. He maintained that he could only guess at these events' chronology as he wasn't present himself. He spent the night in his car with his belongings. In the morning, he simply drove away without realizing the tragedy that had occurred at home. His narrative came across as inconsistent and implausible. Furthermore, the evidence indirectly pointed to him as the sole perpetrator. Consequently, Grant was arrested as the primary suspect in the triple homicide of his family members. Unable to post a $750,000 bond, he remained in custody, awaiting trial. The trial began on July 15, 2019. Notably, almost all witnesses who testified in court spoke against Grant. This included his older brother Jason, relatives, and Cody's friend Jeremy, from whom Grant had stolen money during their trip to Japan. Those closely acquainted with him described Grant as prone to various addictions, a pathological thief and liar. The main piece of evidence against Grant was a significant bank transfer from Chad's account to Grant's account. This transaction took place late at night when all family members were already deceased. To confirm the transaction, Grant used his deceased father's finger for identification purposes. The prosecution advocated for the death penalty, while his defense argued that Grant was ill and required treatment. On August 12, 2019, a verdict was delivered. The court found 30-year-old Grant Amato guilty of first-degree triple homicide and sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When Manhattan resident and mother of two, Sheila Danby, was found deceased in her bathtub in December 2009, the police initially ruled her death an accident fate. However, about 6 months after the incident, suspicions led her family to exhume the woman's body. The subsequent autopsy revealed shocking new details, prompting the launch of a murder investigation. Sheila Danby was a New Yorker who owned a luxury apartment on Manhattan's Upper West Side. At time of her death, she was in the process of divorcing Rod Sin, and they were embroiled in a custody battle over their two children, 9-year-old Anna and 3-year-old Miles. The ex-husband resided next door in the same complex, and they saw each other periodically. Their relationship was very strained. People who knew Sheila described her as a loving and caring mother who always prioritized her children above all else. They noted her friendly and gentle nature, along with her outer and inner beauty. She was highly intelligent and accomplished in every respect. Colleagues regarded her as a professional in her business. She was a successful Wall Street investment banker with several $1 million to her name. The sudden and tragic death of Sheila came as a shock to everyone who knew her. She had no known enemies at work or in her personal life at that time. She was single and not involved in any romantic relationships. Sheila devoted herself wholeheartedly to raising her children, which was her top priority. On the morning of that tragic day, December 31, 2009, Sheila's daughter Anna woke up first and went to the bathroom. There she encountered a horrific scene. Her mother's body floating face down in the bathtub, with water tinged red with blood. Additionally, the closet door directly above the bathtub had been ripped off its hinges. Shocked and frightened, Anna ran out of the bathroom and immediately dialed her father's number, reporting that something terrible had happened to her mom. A man living nearby quickly rushed to the apartment and, upon entering the bathroom, found his former wife unconscious. This account encapsulates the professional background and personal tragedy surrounding Sheila Danby's untimely demise that spurred further inquiries into what truly transpired on that fateful day. Rod notified 911, and emergency services were dispatched to the address. Meanwhile, the man took her body from the bathtub, covered her with a blanket, and tried to give her CPR as instructed by the operator. He hoped to resuscitate the woman, but it didn't work. By then, medics had already arrived. When they entered the apartment, they found him still in the bathtub, not giving up on trying to save her. Medics checked her pulse. There was none. The body was cold. They pronounced the death of a 47-year-old woman as they observed signs of rigor mortis, determining that she had died about an hour earlier. Rod was grief-stricken. Crying with his children, he was deeply worried about what had happened. The medics had to sedate him because he was so distressed. Upon arriving at the scene, police officers examined the bathtub closely. They noticed a broken cabinet door and presumed it was related to the incident. It appeared that while reaching for something in the cabinet, she slipped and fell, hitting her head on the tub. This caused her to lose consciousness and drown. The head injury caused significant bleeding, explaining the red color of the water. Everything indicated an accident. There were no signs of forced entry or anything missing from the home. Given these factors, the case was closed as an accident. Due to their religious beliefs, Sheila's family requested no autopsy be performed once her death was ruled accidental. She was subsequently buried. However, following her funeral, doubts began to emerge among her loved ones about the nature of her sudden demise. Sheila's relatives highlighted inconsistencies. She never took baths with water due to time constraints and always showered instead, raising questions about why she would be found in a full bathtub. Additionally, they recalled she had undergone a keratin hair treatment just a day before her death, something that required keeping her hair dry for 3 days afterward. Given these circumstances, and considering how diligent Sheila usually was about following such rules, her loved ones began suspecting that her death might not have been an unfortunate accident. They wondered if foul play could have somehow been responsible for this tragedy. Sheila was known to avoid bathing in a bathtub. It went against her habits and couldn't be true. The suspicions grew so strong that her relatives asked the police to start an investigation into her death and requested that her body be exhumed. Initially, the police did not take these requests seriously because everything seemed obvious. A woman fell in the bathtub, hit her head, and died. However, the relatives managed to convince detectives to conduct an autopsy on Sheila's body. Her body was exhumed in April 2010 and sent for autopsy. This is when it was discovered that Sheila had been strangled before being placed in the bathtub. The forensic expert determined that she had been strangled with such force that her hyoid bone was broken and several ribs were also fractured. The head trauma wasn't serious and couldn't have caused her death. It appeared that Sheila died as a result of a violent struggle while being choked. The perpetrator might have had martial arts training and performed the chokehold with precision. Additionally, a forensic medical examiner who reviewed photos of the deceased noted fresh bruises on her arms and severe bruising around her eyes. In light of these new findings, law enforcement officials had no choice but to launch an investigation into Sheila's murder. The investigation was complicated by the fact that several months had passed since the tragedy, and no one initially suspected homicide, leaving no evidence at the scene. Detectives only had a few photos taken by officers who arrived for the initial report. Investigators believed that over those months, all traces would have likely been destroyed during bathroom cleanups. Nevertheless, despite significant doubts, they couldn't ignore this path forward. Upon arriving at the deceased woman's apartment for an inspection, police officers discovered that her children and husband resided there. The husband courteously permitted the detectives to enter and examine the premises. The CSIs proceeded to the bathroom, finding nothing of interest as expected. Rod mentioned that after his wife's death, the bathroom was meticulously cleaned multiple times with a cleaning agent, erasing all traces of blood. This thorough cleaning aimed to spare their children from distressing memories associated with their mother. The man had received authorization from police officers present on the day of the death to perform this cleaning. There were no witnesses to the crime. Only young children were in the apartment at the time. They were interviewed, but reported neither seeing nor hearing anything suspicious. Additionally, investigators observed no signs of forced entry into the house, suggesting that either the perpetrator possessed a key or was willingly let inside by someone. It was likely that the woman knew her killer, leading detectives to believe it was someone familiar to her. After speaking with her loved ones, they learned that Sheil had no enemies or ill-wishers, but had endured conflicts with her ex-husband over divorce and child custody matters. Sheil and Rod first met in 1998 while working on Wall Street. Sheil was already a successful professional then, serving as a vice president at a major financial company, while Rod was a novice investment trader getting started in the field. Despite this difference in experience, they quickly fell in love and began an intense romance, marrying just months later. Their swift marriage surprised many. Some friends even advised Sheil to take her time and assess her feelings before committing to someone new in her life. They worried he might not have genuine intentions, seeing how rapidly he captured her heart. However, blinded by love, Sheil ignored these concerns. The newlyweds moved into Sheil's luxurious apartment in New York's upscale Upper West Side neighborhood near Central Park. Before long, they welcomed a daughter named Anna into their lives. Though motherhood occupied much of Sheil's time initially, she soon returned to work and hired a nanny to assist with childcare duties. Sheil advanced to a fruitful career and eventually ran a company. Meanwhile, Rod struggled to find success in this endeavor despite his wife's support. Ultimately, he abandoned the job and turned his attention to pursuing his passions. Rod was passionate about martial arts, earning a black belt and actively participating in competitions. He convinced his wife that his future lay in sports, where he believed he could excel and become a coach. She believed him. However, Rod's focus shifted again, first to backgammon, then to various other hobbies that he changed frequently. His behavior exhibited signs of immaturity throughout this period, as he relied heavily on his wife for support and occasionally solicited funds from his parents. The couple welcomed a second child, a son. On the surface, they appeared content. However, Rod concealed a double life from his wife. In addition to experimenting with numerous hobbies, Rod engaged in extramarital affairs. Initially, he was involved with one woman, then two, but eventually expanded these activities. His address book contained around 20 women with whom he regularly met. Rod even created a schedule on his computer to manage these appointments without confusion. He connected with new acquaintances online and didn't shy away from meeting women of questionable character. Rod portrayed himself as a successful banker from Wall Street, attracting attention from women who aspired to secure such a promising partner. At home, however, he treated his wife poorly, often with insult and humiliation, reducing her to tears. But deception has its limits. Rod's deceit was ultimately uncovered by his own wife. Suspecting infidelity for some time, she hired a private detective who collected comprehensive evidence against him. The investigation revealed that amiss Rod was simultaneously communicating online with 860 women. Confronted with the evidence, Rod did not deny it. He admitted that monogamy wasn't something he could uphold despite claiming love for her and seeing her as suitable for their shared life. He proposed an open relationship, a suggestion met with firm refusal from his wife, leading her to the conclusion that she could no longer endure his behavior. Exhausted by his antics and deceptions, she decided to file for divorce. In April 2009, the woman decided to kick her husband, Kay, out of their apartment, but felt pity and rented him a place not far from home. She thought he had nowhere else to go. Later, she regretted that decision deeply. After moving out, Rod realized that a divorce would mean losing all his assets as well as the lavish lifestyle he was accustomed to. He knew that without money, his new girlfriends would lose interest in him. Therefore, he began threatening Sheila that he would take her children away and pursue her relentlessly if they divorced. Sheila wanted to avoid trouble and contemplated how to resolve the problem with her ex-husband. She offered him a $250,000 payoff to make him go away. However, Rod rejected the offer and demanded more money along with full custody of their children. He intentionally threatened and manipulated Sheila by exploiting what mattered most to her, her children, despite knowing that he had no genuine interest in them. Sheila's lawyer advised against negotiating with him, confident that the evidence would sway the court in their favor. Rod's anger only grew due to Sheila's refusal to yield. He took drastic measures by informing her workplace that she was taking illegal substances. Even though everyone knew this was untrue, Sheila's supervisor couldn't ignore it and sent her for testing, which proved she was clean. When this plan failed, Rod reported his wife to the tax office, but even this investigation showed she was compliant with the law. Determined to cause more trouble, he began using his own set of keys to enter Sheila's apartment and create disturbances. Rod then falsely accused Sheila of molesting their 3-year-old son. The boy was referred to a child psychologist who confirmed nothing inappropriate had occurred. All this turmoil pushed Sheila towards a nervous breakdown due to the relentless problems caused by her ex-husband. In court, however, her lawyer successfully found Rod guilty of slander, and consequently, he was banned from communicating with both his children and his wife. The wife obtained a restraining order against Rod just a couple of days prior to her death. She communicated with her lawyer, expressing her intent to modify her will. She aimed to exclude her ex-husband, who was slated to receive $4 million. Instead, she wished to leave her entire fortune to her children. The lawyer agreed to implement the necessary changes and scheduled an appointment for the woman to sign the updated documents on January 1st. However, Sheila passed away before she had the chance to do so, which raised suspicions. The relatives found Sheila's sudden death peculiar and linked it with Rod's unusual conduct. They asserted that Sheila was deeply fearful of him. The nanny reported hearing Rod verbally abuse and threaten his spouse frequently. On one occasion, she even witnessed him push Sheila, causing her to fall. This led the nanny to fear how abusive he might have been in private. Investigators began suspecting Rod as well, since he appeared to have a clear motive. He seemed aware that Sheila intended to amend her will, which would remove him as a beneficiary. Consequently, he had a substantial financial incentive, benefiting both from an inheritance and a sizable $1 million life insurance policy on Sheila. In addition, detectives knew Rod possessed a key to his ex-wife's apartment, thus enabling him easy access. It was possible for him to commit the crime without obstacles and leave undetected. The way Rod allegedly left their young children alone with their deceased mother struck detectives as incredibly insensitive. This harrowing experience severely impacted Sheila's daughter, who required long-term psychological counseling due to the trauma. Despite these strong suspicions and precautions taken by investigators regarding Rod's potential involvement in Sheila's death, there was no direct evidence, such as DNA or fingerprints, linking him conclusively to the crime. Because of this lack of concrete evidence, the case remained contentious in terms of legal proceedings. Hence, police officers were reluctant to arrest or charge him formally. The investigation continued, and during this period, her insurance and inheritance were suspended. A new custody trial for the deceased's children began as well. Rod sought custody to gain access to his wife's finances through the children. However, her parents strongly opposed this because they believed Rod was at fault for their daughter's death. Additionally, Shell's words revealed that Rod disliked children, mistreated them, and frequently beat them. This was corroborated by the children during the trial. Even his own parents testified against him, accusing him of abusing the children and stealing $80,000 from them. Consequently, custody of the children was awarded to the parents of the deceased. In the meantime, Rod found himself without support and for the first time had to fend for himself. Lacking any means of livelihood, he secured a job as a debt collector. His aggressive tactics instilled fear in debtors who lodged complaints against him. Ultimately, his career in debt collection did not flourish, and he was terminated from his position. As time passed, the police struggled to find solid evidence against Rod. This case might have remained unresolved had one of Rod's former lovers not come forward in 2015. The woman finally decided to inform the police that Rod had confessed to her about murdering his wife. According to her, Rod's greed for his wife's money drove him to commit the act. He showed no interest in the children, except as a means to gain financial benefit through custody. Additionally, she provided shockingly new information. Rod had planned to kill his late wife's parents as well, and disguise their deaths as accidental events in order to regain custody and access his deceased wife's money. However, all his plans unraveled one by one. At one point, he even considered involving his daughter, who was a teenager at that time. In the realization of the plan, he tried to convince her that charges of harassment should be brought against her grandfather. But the girl categorically refused to participate in this. To prove her words, the former mistress presented the police with voice messages sent to her from Rod's cell phone. Now the police had new evidence. Based on the testimony of his mistress and these reports, Rod was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife in November 2015. This news came as a blow to Rod. He was confident of his impunity and planned to get away with murdering his wife, taking all her millions with him. The trial began in 2019, during which Rod denied all the allegations against him. He denied planning the murder, being in his wife's apartment that morning, killing her, and planning to kill her parents to get close to the money. On the prosecution side, there were numerous witnesses who spoke about Rod's abuse of his wife and children, as well as his affairs on the left. They discussed his intentions to gain access to all of his wife's money and control over financial matters in the event of a divorce. According to the prosecutor, Rod was motivated by money to get rid of his wife. He had a key to the apartment and knew how to perform a chokehold, which was used to kill her, Sheila. Though there was no direct evidence against him in this case, there was enough circumstantial proof. A mistress appeared at trial and testified against Rod. This finally convinced the jury that he was guilty. Rod's children encouraged them to ask the court not to send their father to prison, given they had already lost one parent and did not want to lose another. The 12-year-old son spoke at trial, and although the 18-year-old daughter was absent, she relayed a plea asking for mercy for their father. However, these requests did not sway the jury. They found him guilty. Rod was sentenced to life in prison with a possibility of parole after 25 years. In the somber confines of the courtroom, Menhaz Zaman stood before the judge, his voice trembling with remorse as he expressed the depths of his regret for the irreparable harm he had caused. With heavy hearts, he sought forgiveness from all those he had wronged, especially those who had lost loved ones as a result of his unforgivable actions. Acknowledging the profound damage inflicted upon his family and the wider community, Menhaz bowed his head in shame, unable to escape the weight of his guilt. November 2020 marked the fateful moment when Menhaz's fate was sealed with a life sentence, condemning him to spend the next 4 decades behind bars. At the tender age of 24, he was stripped of his freedom, serving time for the deaths of 4 individuals who had once been dear to him. His father, Manur, taken at 59, his mother, Momotaz, at 50, his grandmother at 70, and his sister, tragically gone at the tender age of 21. Despite the sacrifices made for his well-being, Menhaz's actions had brought nothing but devastation upon his family. As he languished in the confines of his prison cell, Menhaz grappled with the emptiness and loneliness that engulfed his once vibrant life. Cut off from the virtual world he had once sought solace in, he was forced to confront the gravity of his prolonged deception. In the quiet solitude of his confinement, he reflected on the twisted web of lies he had spun to maintain his facade, the weight of his deception bearing down upon him like a leaden burden. The truth of Menhaz's deception came to light as he stood trial, each revelation serving as a painful reminder of the betrayal and deceit that had torn his family apart. The Zan family, once united in love and solidarity, now faced the harsh reality of their shattered lives, haunted by the knowledge that their own flesh and blood had been responsible for their unimaginable loss. In the end, as Menhaz faced the consequences of his actions, he could only hope that his remorse would serve as a meager consolation to those he had wronged. But as the doors of his prison cell closed behind him, He knew that no amount of regret could ever undo the irreparable damage he had wrought upon the lives of those he held most dear. As the fake graduation date of July 28th drew near, Menhaz's behavior took a disturbing turn. Seemingly unraveling before the eyes of those around him, he adopted the persona of a lost soul, referring to himself as a subhuman unworthy of life. Dark jokes about suicide peppered his conversations, revealing the depths of his despair. But who was this troubled individual? Menhaz Zaman, a young Canadian with a promising future, appeared to be living the dream as a mechanical engineering student at York University. However, the truth was far from what it seemed. In reality, Menhaz had never set foot on the university campus. Concealing this fact from his parents, he plunged deeper into a world of deceit, fabricating elaborate tales to maintain his facade of academic success. Each passing year brought new challenges as he struggled to uphold his double life, the pressure mounting as graduation loomed on the horizon. The strain took its toll on Menhaz's mental well-being, pushing him to the brink of desperation. In a desperate bid for attention, Menhaz resorted to unthinkable measures. On that fateful day, he committed the ultimate act of betrayal, snuffing out the lives of his own family members in a chilling display of violence. Posting photos of his heinous crime on his Discord channel, he sought to shock and horrify, drawing the gaze of a horrified audience. While some initially dismissed his actions as a tasteless prank, the grim reality soon became undeniable. Despite Menhaz's efforts to conceal his identity, the truth of his origins lay in a land far from the bustling streets of Toronto. Born from the complex tapestry of Bangladesh, his family had harbored dreams of a better life in the promise of a new beginning. Manyo Zan, his father, and Momas, his mother, had embarked on a journey of hope, leaving behind their homeland to seek their fortune in Canada. Their arrival in Toronto marked the beginning of a new chapter, filled with aspirations for a brighter future. With the birth of Menhaz and later Mesa, they endeavored to create a loving and nurturing environment for their children. Momas, in particular, was hailed as a beacon of kindness and generosity, her unwavering support a source of strength for the family and the broader Bangladeshi immigrant community. Yet, beneath the veneer of normalcy lay a web of secrets and lies, woven by Menhaz in his relentless pursuit of acceptance and validation. The tragic events that unfolded would serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of the human psyche and the devastating consequences of unchecked deception. And as Menhaz's dark descent came to light, the world could only watch in horror, grappling with the incomprehensible depths of his betrayal. Moni Roos, husband to Momotaz, possessed a quiet demeanor that belied his deep sense of pride and devotion to his family. Known as an introvert within the neighborhood, he commanded respect through his modesty and unwavering dedication. A devout Muslim, Moni placed his family above all else, embodying the values of faith and integrity in his daily life. For years, he toiled as a taxi driver, his commitment to his profession earning him recognition as one of the finest in the city. Having relocated to the bustling metropolis in pursuit of a better life, Moni and Momotaz harbored lofty ambitions for their children. Mesa and Menhaz, the apples of their parents' eyes, were envisioned as future pillars of success, destined for lucrative careers that would afford them comfort and prosperity. Despite their own humble beginnings, Moni and Momotaz were determined to provide their offspring with every opportunity for advancement, sparing no effort in their quest for success. Their journey towards prosperity began modestly, with the purchase of a humble abode on Mauen Road in Scarborough. Through prudent financial planning and astute investments, they soon expanded their portfolio, acquiring 2 additional properties in the same area and a house nearby in Danforth. Momotaz assumed the role of property manager, overseeing their growing assets with precision and care. As the family's fortunes continued to ascend, so too did Momotaz's sense of responsibility towards her children and their burgeoning real estate empire. Recognizing the need for support, her mother Fosa made the journey from India to lend a helping hand. With her assistance, Momotaz found equilibrium between her professional endeavors and personal life, ensuring that both flourished in tandem. In 2006, they embarked on a significant investment, purchasing a spacious 4-bedroom house in the neighboring town of Markham. This move symbolized their aspirations for a brighter future, aligning with the widely held belief that success in life hinged on careers in medicine or engineering. Mesa harbored dreams of becoming a neurosurgeon, while Menhaz was earmarked for a career in engineering, in line with his parents' hopes and aspirations. However, the path to success proved arduous, fraught with challenges and unforeseen obstacles. Melissa, their eldest daughter, rebelled against their expectations, often veering off course with reckless behavior. Her defiance strained the familial bonds, leading to conflicts that spilled beyond the confines of their home and attracted the unwanted attention of law enforcement. Despite their best efforts, Moni and Momotaz struggled to rein in Melissa's wayward tendencies, her actions casting a shadow over the family's aspirations. In stark contrast, Menhaz exuded a quiet and reserved demeanor, forging a close bond with his mother, Momotaz. She doted on him, fulfilling his every need and desire, showering him with love and attention. Menhaz, the eldest son, felt the weight of his parents' expectations bearing down on him, driving him to excel and meet their lofty standards. Yet, beneath the facade of familial harmony, Menhaz sought solace in the virtual realm of online gaming, immersing himself in virtual worlds where he found refuge from the pressures of reality. His fascination with MMO games like Perfect World provided an escape from the rigors of everyday life, offering a platform for self-expression and social interaction. While his peers pursued academic endeavors, Menhaz retreated further into the confines of his room, spending hours on end immersed in online gaming communities. Despite the facade of academic success, Menhaz grappled with a sense of inadequacy and the burden of unmet expectations. Upon receiving news of his acceptance into the mechanical engineering program at York University, Menhaz's achievement was hailed as a triumph, further cementing his status as the family's favored child. Yet, beneath the veneer of success lay a mounting pressure to prove himself worthy of their adulation. With each passing day, the weight of expectations bore down on Menhaz, driving him further into the depths of his virtual refuge. As the weight of expectations mounted, Menhaz retreated further into the virtual realm, seeking solace in the digital landscapes of online gaming. Venturing into an enhanced version of the Perfect World game, he found camaraderie among fellow players, forging connections within the confines of this virtual community. Through the popular social network Discord, Menhaz maintained contact with friends and acquaintances, finding a sense of belonging that eluded him in the real world. Within the game, Menhaz shed the constraints of his shy and reserved persona, embracing his true self in a space where authenticity thrived. Here, amidst the pixels and avatars, he felt liberated from the burdens of reality, free to express himself without fear of judgment or censure. The supportive atmosphere fostered friendships that transcended the boundaries of the game, providing Menhaz with a sense of belonging that he struggled to find elsewhere. Meanwhile, Melissa's rebellion continued unabated, her defiance a constant source of tension within the family home. Despite their efforts to rein her in, her actions only served to exacerbate the already strained atmosphere. Her departure from home did little to alleviate the palpable tension, leaving a void that Menhaz sought to fill with his virtual escapades. In the eyes of their parents, Menhaz emerged as the beacon of hope, the embodiment of their aspirations for a brighter future. They boasted of his supposed acceptance into York University's prestigious engineering program, basking in the imagined glory of his academic achievements. However, beneath the facade of parental pride lay a web of deception, as Menhaz's purported success crumbled under scrutiny. In reality, Menhaz's academic journey took a different trajectory, far removed from the lofty heights his parents envisioned. Instead of York University, he found himself enrolled in the less prestigious confines of Seneca Community College, his dreams of academic success shattered. Struggling to keep pace with his studies, he grappled with feelings of loneliness and disillusionment, his sense of identity eroded by the weight of unmet expectations. Frustrated by the suffocating grip of parental control, Menhaz rebelled against the constraints imposed upon him, casting aside the religious beliefs that once anchored him. His disillusionment only deepened as he confronted the stark reality of his circumstances, grappling with a sense of betrayal and abandonment. Amidst the wreckage of broken dreams, Menhaz sought solace in the virtual embrace of online gaming, the only refuge left in a world fraught with disappointment and deceit. Despite his tumultuous relationships and mounting academic struggles, Menhaz sought solace and independence through his online interactions. His burgeoning romance with a girl he met on the internet only served to stoke his parents' disapproval and exacerbate his frustration. Nevertheless, Menhaz remained determined to assert his autonomy, finding refuge in the immersive world of Perfect World and the vibrant Discord community. Initially, Menhaz managed to maintain a facade of academic diligence, but as his obsession with gaming intensified, his grades suffered a precipitous decline. His once promising academic career spiraled into chaos as he began skipping classes and neglecting his studies altogether. Despite his academic freefall, Menhaz managed to conceal the extent of his academic failures from his unsuspecting parents, who remained oblivious to his academic woes. Each day, Menhaz embarked on a carefully orchestrated charade, leaving home ostensibly to attend classes at York University. In reality, he spent his days ensconced in a local cafe, engrossed in his virtual pursuits. From there, he would make a cursory visit to the gym before returning to his online haven, where he whiled away the hours until the late hours of the night. Menhaz's online persona belied the darkness that consumed him, as he frequently joked with his virtual companions about his impending incarceration and his impending departure from their midst. However, beneath the veneer of levity, his humor took on a sinister edge, laced with aggression and hostility. His increasingly provocative remarks drew ire from community members, culminating in his eventual banishment from the platform. Despite the mounting concerns surrounding Menhaz's behavior, his online associates dismissed his antics as mere attention-seeking, failing to recognize the depths of his isolation and despair. As Menhaz retreated further into his virtual cocoon, Melissa sought to forge her own path, severing ties with her family and pursuing her academic aspirations at York University. From the outside, the Zaman family appeared to be on the cusp of a new chapter filled with promise and potential. Yet, unbeknownst to them, Menhaz's descent into darkness would soon shatter the illusion of familial harmony, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. On July 27, 2019, the Zaman household buzzed with the usual activity, unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. Menhaz, calculating and methodical, seized the opportunity to set his sinister plan into motion. With chilling composure, he crept into his mother's bedroom, armed with a crowbar. In a swift and brutal assault, he rendered her unconscious with a single blow to the head before mercilessly slitting her throat. The scene of carnage was soon replicated as Menhaz turned his attention to his unsuspecting grandmother, dispatching her with the same ruthless efficiency. Having executed his heinous acts, Menhaz retreated to the confines of his room, his facade of normalcy now shattered. With a sense of perverse satisfaction, he chronicled his atrocities on Discord, sharing grotesque images of his victims' mutilated bodies alongside the implements of his depravity. To some, accustomed to Menhaz's macabre sense of humor, the ghastly display seemed like another tasteless joke. However, for those unaccustomed to such dark behavior, it sparked genuine alarm and disbelief. As the gravity of Menhaz's actions began to dawn on his online acquaintances, panic ensued. The realization that a potential spree of violence was unfolding in real time left them feeling helpless and powerless to intervene. Desperate to prevent further bloodshed, they frantically scrambled to identify the perpetrator, but Menhaz had meticulously concealed his identity, leaving them grasping at straws. Amidst the chaos, Junior, a close friend of Menhaz, found himself bombarded with inquiries from concerned users seeking insight into his friend's motives. Driven by a sense of urgency, Junior confronted Menhaz, seeking confirmation of the grim reality depicted in the disturbing images. Menhaz's chilling response confirmed their worst fears, revealing his intention to claim the lives of his remaining family members. Meanwhile, oblivious to the unfolding tragedy, Melissa returned home, greeted by an eerie silence that belied the horror lurking within. Unbeknownst to her, she had walked into a nightmare, orchestrated by her own brother. As she ventured further into the house, she fell victim to the same brutal fate that had befallen her mother and grandmother, her life snuffed out by the hands of her own flesh and blood. In the aftermath of his sister's murder, Menhaz callously documented her demise, capturing her lifeless form in a macabre photograph. With chilling detachment, he shared the image with a friend named John, callously recounting the harrowing ordeal as if it were nothing more than a macabre spectacle to be observed and dissected. In a private message to John, Menhaz uttered words of self-condemnation, branding himself as a pathetic coward and a subhuman, consumed by a profound sense of shame and self-loathing. With a macabre sense of detachment, he proceeded to inundate John with a series of grisly photographs, each one more harrowing than the last. Among them was an image of the murder weapon, and even a disturbing selfie featuring Menhaz himself, brandishing a bloodied knife, a grotesque testament to the depths of his depravity. Horrified by the gruesome evidence before him, John wasted no time in sharing these chilling images with the rest of the Discord group, each photo serving as damning proof of Menhaz's heinous crimes. As the community rallied to gather as much evidence as possible against him, Menhaz continued to play the part of the oblivious gamer, biding his time until his father's return. When Manure, Menhaz's father, unwittingly stepped into the trap laid by his own son, he fell victim to the same brutal fate that had befallen the rest of his family. With cold precision, Menhaz launched his final assault, stabbing his father in the neck, before callously capturing the aftermath in yet another chilling photograph. In the wake of his heinous acts, Menhaz grappled with his own demons, acknowledging his cowardice and selfishness in a series of remorseful messages to his online acquaintances. Expressing a warped sense of resignation, he resigned himself to a life behind bars, inviting his friends to bear witness to the grim spectacle he had orchestrated. Amidst the chaos, one Discord user devised a plan to trace Menhaz's location through his IP address, a digital breadcrumb trail that led authorities straight to his doorstep. As the net closed in around him, Menhaz made no attempt to flee, choosing instead to confront the consequences of his actions head-on. 12 agonizing hours after the bloodshed, law enforcement officers descended upon the Zaman residence, their suspicions confirmed by the sight of Menhaz peering down at them from his bedroom window. Surrendering himself to the authorities without resistance, Menhaz offered no protest as he was led away in handcuffs, his stoic demeanor betraying no hint of remorse or regret. Charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder, Menhaz stood trial as the weight of his crimes bore down upon him. With the damning evidence amassed by the online gaming community serving as irrefutable proof of his guilt, there remained little doubt as to his ultimate fate. In the end, justice prevailed, but the scars left behind by Menhaz's reign of terror would linger for years to come, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurks within the human soul.